I'd like to welcome you all to our school board study session this evening, Monday, November 27th. We will start with public forum, as we always do. I'll read the rules and then share a little statement from the board. So input from students, staff, parents, and community members in major decisions can be a valuable form of assistance to the board. Open forum is an opportunity to address the board. At least 10 minutes prior to each meeting, a sign-up sheet will be available at the meeting site for individuals to sign up to address the board. Only those whose names appear on the sign-up sheet at the time of the meeting is called to order shall be permitted to address the board. Up to 5 speakers shall be provided a maximum of 3 minutes, so 15 minutes total, to address the board, unless an exception is granted by the board chair. Speakers will not be allowed to verbally attack, disparage, or potentially defame individual board members, employees, or students, nor may speakers use vulgar or profane language. Also, speakers may be precluded from disclosing personally identifiable private data regarding employees or students. Speakers unwilling to conform to the rules or time constraints may be told his/her privilege of speaking has ended. If you have any handouts or materials for the board, please submit those items to the executive assistant, Martha Waltz. Members of the public should not approach the dais. The board will not review handouts during the public comment period. Board members shall listen respectfully to issues brought to them by the community, but not engage the individuals during their time. The board shall not deliberate or take action during the open forum regarding an issue presented. If follow-up by administration is necessary, the chair shall request that the superintendent follow up on the matter. When the board chair proceeds with the meeting, audience comments are no longer in order. However, the board members retain the right to call on district administrators for information to assist the board in its deliberations. So just to give a little more clarity, the open forum we know is a safe space for our community members to share their experiences, concerns, and feedback. In this space, we strive to protect First Amendment rights while showing respect for everyone. We would like to ask the community to be respectful, not only in speaking at open forum, but also in listening. And we as a community have an opportunity to elevate this conversation and create healthy spaces for dialogue and opposing views. I want to thank the community for demonstrating this, and it shows how we can all collectively do better. Thank you for respectfully sharing, listening, and being engaged in our PLSAS community. And we have one speaker tonight. It's Bill Markert talking to us about the budget and strategic plan.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening. There are 3 topics I'd like to briefly address with the board tonight. The first is related to this year's general fund expenditure budget. I do not understand how this year's budget will be $116.5 million when we ended last year recording roughly $116.1 million in general fund expenditures. The district said earlier this year that it intends to spend $4.8 million for new or incremental investments in this upcoming 2023-24 school year. If that's true, then why wouldn't this year's expenditure budget grow by $4.8 million, not be essentially flat with last year? I believe the district needs to do a better job at explaining or at least reconciling this with the public so there are no surprises next June when the district closes its books for the year and finds out expenses are materially over budget, as they were this past year, roughly $2.8 million over budget to be exact. The second topic I want to bring to your attention is related to the strategic plan being discussed tonight. On one of the pages of the presentation deck you'll be reviewing, it reflects establishing of community engagement committees, or community engagement committees. It lists parent advisory committees, chambers, seniors, and Rotary. I believe it's entirely inappropriate for the board to create our district's strategic plan by including input from the Rotary Club and the Chambers of Commerce. This is not their plan. The strategic plan of the school district should reflect the wishes of parents and individual taxpayers and not organizations. I'd like to know how, for example, the Rotary Club was picked, but not the Lions Club, the Optimist Club, Moms for Liberty, all the churches in the community, or any other nonprofit organization. Those individual members of our community organizations that wish to contribute to this process should do so, but as individuals, not organizations that have their own plans and agendas. Only parents of students who live within our district boundaries and individuals that pay our district property taxes should be allowed to participate in this process. Like I said, not organizations. Lastly, before I leave, I want to thank the district for their transparency they exhibited recently with taxpayers and parents regarding what the district has offered the teachers union. I think it's an incredibly generous offer and better comp plan increases than what you would find in the private sector during the next 2 years. I hope the district can afford it, but I appreciate the honesty and the transparency that the district gave to everyone, just so we know that we're not being cheap. I think what we offered is excellent. I hope the contract negotiations are settled soon. So thank you for listening tonight.
We will move on to our purpose and agenda. Dr. Thomas.
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Crosby, members of the board. Welcome to our first real cold spell of the season. I think we're in it now. And just as a reminder to everyone, we do have inclement weather notifications that we are monitoring, and we're in that season. So stay tuned as we get further into that. Tonight, just a couple of things that we'll be discussing through our work session. It's our opportunity, as we always say, to dive deeper into conversations with the board to get a better understanding of questions that you might have, kind of guidance for the work that we have together as an administrative team. And tonight we'll be going over just our strategic plan update. This is a carryover from our one of our conversations with the board. I believe it might have been at a superintendent's update during a business meeting. Had a idea to move forward with Studer Education to keep our costs moderate without getting a third-party entity coming in with an additional cost. And met with the executive team. We'll give you of the board, and just for some framing of how we bring this to the work session tonight. So you'll see that presentation. We will give you a final budget discussion with Executive Director Frederickson and the team. And then we have a proclamation for Inclusive Schools Week, and then a few policies to round out the conversation this evening before we close for or adjourn for a closed session. So with that,
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Can I clarify there for a second? You talked about not bringing a third party in, and I think as board members, we all understand what that means for strategy work, but it actually is a third party, but it's
yes,
piggybacking on work they're already doing. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for allowing me to clarify that. Yeah. Bringing in a different third party
right.
in addition to a consultant group that we already are partnering with to do a separate strategic planning consultant in addition to the consultants that we have. We thought there'd be an opportunity for us to work smarter, not harder, and more efficiently. And so we are doing so with Studer to move forward with the strategic planning process, as well as internal teaming that we'll talk about tonight.
Awesome, thanks. I just didn't want any confusion. And then we always reference our district governance and policy with our board working document, which came out of previous strategic plan work, and today the biggest piece on there that we're tied to is district policy. We're reviewing some policies in the 400s to 600s. So with that, we'll move on to the oversight of operations and our strategic plan update. And Casey is here from Studer to lead us through that with Dr. Thomas.
Yes, thank you. And you all have gotten to know Casey over the past several months, and certainly we have as an administrative team. And so when we were having conversations around our leadership development, I brought up the notion of strategic planning, which is something that Studer does in a very robust, traditional fashion as well. And so when we inquired about the possibility of partnering with Studer with our existing contract and augmenting that somewhat, there was an opportunity that we were able to move some of our coaching sessions around, talk internally as an administrative team as to how we would do some of our local engagement, as well as partnering, with Studer to do some of the broader design team engagement. So really excited to enhance the partnership that we have. I think it also lends itself well to the work that you've all engaged with as a board with Studer, as well as the work that we've already done as a district leadership team with Studer, that you'll see a lot of alignment in terms of the direction that we've been going, that this will help put together a nice framework for a strategic planning process. to carry us into June for our final recommendation to the board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Casey to walk through kind of the sequence of what it looks like with Studer, and then I'll expound more on what our overall cadence will look like beginning in January.
Wonderful, and thank you for the introduction, Dr. Thomas, and school board. Thanks for the opportunity to share this with you this evening. Just want to do a check on the sound. Is it coming through okay?
That's good.
Lovely. Thank you for the collective response in this virtual world of how we let one another know that we're coming through loud and clear. So I'm going to just use a short deck tonight to just provide a high-level overview, as Dr. Thomas indicated, of how our partnership can work together to support you in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools in your next journey into the strategic planning process. You've seen this slide before. The next phase in our work together. We've spent over a year now supporting the school district in the area of leadership development, ranging all the way from associate principals up to you at the board governance table, and really focusing that work on those two parallel paths of culture and strategy, and how those have to walk side by side in organizations like yours that are committed to being an organization of excellence. And a review of your strategic plan and priorities moving you into the next 3 to 5 years is a really important and critical step in that process. Because what it really sets you up well to do, as you know from your work with your previous strategic plan, is to really create that idea of purpose, of worthwhile work in your organization, really aligned to those values that your community desires in terms of priorities for your students, your staff, your family, and your community, and creates what we at Studer Education call a line of sight, so that everyone in the organization starts to see how their work directly makes a difference to accomplishing those overall district priorities. This is a slide that as we go forward in our work, you'll see a lot in our strategic planning and priorities process. And we think it just does a really beautiful job of illustrating what organizations like yours at the beginning of this priority refresh are really going through. Right now, and I know it to be true because I've interacted with your team over the past year, you have fantastic skilled members of your team doing their very best, working very hard for students in the community every day, making the best decisions with the information and the priorities and direction that are established at this point. The strategic plan, or a refresh and a review of that process, really helps us move all of those arrows that might be well-intentioned and sort of moving towards different priorities into alignment. And so your strategic plan and priorities becomes this larger blue arrow that over the course of our work together can really help to align our improvement efforts to really harness the best in your organization to achieve those important goals that are influenced and impacted by the community that you serve. And so really the why behind taking the time and organizational energy to develop a strategic plan, first and foremost, as you know from your previous experience, defines that vision of success for you as an organization, and really offers that collective touchstone of why do we do the work that we are doing, and it helps us establish that individual and collective accountability and commitment. Secondly, it helps us as an organization align values and our actions and commitments to really driving towards measurable outcomes. And third, it communicates for your community your priorities. It helps to galvanize actions behind the accomplishment of those priorities. And lastly, creates this beautiful guardrail structure for effective decision-making across your entire organization. And so the work with us at Tutor, I will say we are committed to a strategic plan process being one that doesn't just create a vision, a mission, pillars, priorities, and goals, which is likely things that you've experienced before, but really our continued partnership would then become how do we execute towards those pillars, priorities, and goals in alignment with your organization's vision and mission. And I really think, as Dr. Thomas mentioned, the opportunity that we have to build on the strong cultural work really positions us well to help support you in this next important endeavor for your organization. And I'll share just one final piece for you to consider. As you think about the outcome of the strategic planning process, a strategic plan is, it's a product that's informed by decision-making of a group of your community who engages in a really disciplined process. It's going to involve, as you'll hear Dr. Thomas talk about, the robust plan that your skilled leaders have put in place. It involves both quantitative and qualitative data gathering, understand the numeric success of the district, and also to understand the lived experience of your district. It is or will be an organization-wide, long-term plan for goals and strategies that are prioritized and focused. And again, it's that guiding framework for all in the organization in decision-making and in planning as you move forward. I will share strategic plans that we partner with organizations to develop are not inclusive of everything that you do. They are really focused on strategically ensuring that those priorities that's most important to your district are accomplished through the plan. They're not everything that you do to keep the buses on or the wheels on the bus or the lights on in the building, but really the strategic improvement that your community desires for your students, their experiences, and their achievements. It's not just one idea or one perspective. You'll see from the robust plan that the district has built very intentional ways to engage the broader community over a period of time. But it's also not going to be, when it comes to you, all of the strategies that will be put in place to execute on those priorities. It creates, again, that larger structure of that arrow to say, this is where we want to go. And we look forward to the opportunity to partner together in really executing towards those strategies and monitoring for the success and of the process as we go forward. And finally, I'll share, and this is a learning from many organizations during COVID, while we set those priorities, we also have to recognize that they can't be such a rigid set of requirements that they prevent us from responding to changes in our organization and our environment. But they do create that structure for us of what success looks like for our students, staff, and community in the upcoming year. And so with that, Dr. Thomas, I'm going to turn it over to you to be able to talk through the strategic plan timeline.
All right, thank you, Casey. And one of the things that I would just add to what was shared, I don't know if it would be in the is or is not category, but I think a strategic plan also helps us understand what we will no longer continue to do. So it not only sets a good vision for moving forward, but I would say that I don't think there's been a single district that I've been a part of where I have not heard the notion of our plates are so full, our plates are so full. Because as educators, we are doers, and it's probably a little challenging for many of us to say no. And so I think a strategic plan also gives us permission to say no and not to take on certain things just because we've always done certain things. I think it really helps, and this is something that we've foreshadowed, and we're in the process of working with Casey from an administrative side on the scorecard aspect, and that is what are we doing in our organization that is getting the results that we desire and what is not, and being able to have some of those decisions or discussions to make decisions of what will continue moving forward and or what needs to come off the plate, reinvest, shift investments, etc. So just want to be clear on that aspect as well. So this process, and many of you in maybe your respective roles outside of your role here on the board, maybe in other industries, or maybe some of you who have been here, have been a part of a strategic planning process. And this really needs to be a community-driven process. This is something that I shared, I think, during my first year, maybe towards the middle of my first year. We continually hear this conversation in this post-pandemic, post-fill-in-the-blank of all the stuff that happened in a very short period of years. What is our new normal? And we hear that term, and I think we as a community have changed significantly since the time of this current strategic plan. And it is about working collaboratively together to determine what is that normal looking like for Prior Lake Savage Area schools. And it's really important that folks understand in our community, these are Prior Lake Savage Area community schools. Not Michael's schools, not Tammy's schools, not Amy's schools. Like, these are the community schools. So the community needs to have conversation about what matters most. And so I think through the process of engaging our community, it's something that I think we're going to be able to elicit a lot of conversation and hear a lot from our community about what matters most to them. And just think about my entrance last year during my first year, doing a very intentional 3-month listening and learning. And it was just an opportunity for me to hear from our community, not so much coming in with, here's what we're going to do, but really learning and understanding. And that's what we want to do for the next several months here with our strategic planning process. And there will be some structures that we'll have in place to accomplish some of that. So the vision is to have a core planning team or a core design team. Again, that's going to be the group of about 40 or so individuals that comprise our community, similar to the board committee structures that we have right now. We've got parents, we've got business owners, we've got students, we've got seniors in our community, you name it. We've got a variety of folks who have a vested interest in policy or a vested interest in teaching and learning, etc. So that concept would also be utilized here. Christy and I are working through an application process, kind of mirroring a little bit of what we've done in the past, but also mirroring how we've done our current committee application process. But we want to make sure that we are getting folks who have a vested interest in this district, who are active participants or have skin in the game, if you will. So heavy emphasis placed on getting families with students who are enrolled in our district on this committee. And to what we heard this evening from our public comment, it's individuals, but we also know that individuals comprise various organizations. So for example, we are creating tomorrow's future workforce. Clearly there's going to be an interest for some business owners who are taxpayers in our community who would like to understand, hey, what vision can I bring to this conversation that would help secure, pipelines of employment within Prior Lake Savage Area as well. So obviously niche expertise, niche interests we'll see, but it is about individuals. And so I will clarify this notion. These were just illustrative, but knowing that we're a community comprised of individuals who are part of a variety of groups. And so we want members from all facets, and that's going to be really, really important. Part of our application process will ensure that people are identifying areas that we can understand that we can bring the greatest balance. Obviously, there's certain questions we legally can't ask individuals, but we want to make sure that through some types of questions, we can get a sense of, yeah, we've got enough secondary people, we need more elementary, or we got people who are strong in the faith community, we need more secular folks. We might get some of that through some of the conversations that they add with some of the essays. And again, those of you who sit on some of the committees of the board right now, you've seen some semblance of that, trying to find the best balance that we can. Once we have that core planning team established, we are targeting January for an opportunity to work with an outside organization to do some in-service kind of grounding with that stakeholder group of individuals on that core planning team. That's going to be our opportunity when we bring in diverse perspectives and perhaps sometimes even opposing perspectives. You can imagine sometimes the emotional volatility that could happen, when you engage in this way. And I think it's okay to have a level of pushback and push and pull, whatever, through conversations, but we need to do so in a very respectful and supportive and collaborative manner. And so utilizing an agency such as Braver Angels, I've mentioned this to the board in the past, and there's others like them, that would do some level setting with that core planning team, just so that we have a solid foundation by which we have an understanding of, hey, we might not always see eye to eye, but we're not going to lose integrity, we're not going to lose respect, we're not going to have meltdowns before our community to advance what is best for our kids. So that would be some of the anchoring that we would do with this committee on the front side. In addition to that, there would be a binder of information that would be shared with with the core planning team members. This would be our current strategic plan, could be some exemplars of other strategic plans from neighboring districts. It would be a multitude of resources. Maybe it's from teaching and learning, it's from policy, it's from budgeting. So just if I'm someone who's never interacted with the district in the past, a little background knowledge on the district is going to be helpful. Won't be required for folks to peruse, because it's going to be quite a thick thing, but it'll definitely be a good resource document that they could fall back to or give reference to throughout the entire process. So that would be the seeding as well as the initial training and a little light reading for that first month for folks to familiarize themselves with the district. In the month of February and March, these will be our heavy engagement months. We would look at doing engagement kind of district-wide. So these would be like our traditional community cafe models. I think you've utilized these here in Prior Lake Savage area schools in years past, where we would maybe go to the cafeteria at the high school, and we would have a structured rotation model where we would bring folks from our community around various topics to engage in discussion around the strategic planning process. We would also take advantage of existing committee structures. There might be advisory committees that exist. There are parent PTCs that exist. So there's going to be opportunities for us to be able to plug into some of those existing meetings so that we are ensuring that we're hitting a variety of different stakeholders, both in kind of a district-wide call-out and some targeted opportunities where we become the agenda topic, for example, of several of our elementary PTCs. There would also be meetings that take place throughout the community that might be with some of our community partners. So whether it's, like for example, one of my sessions was done at Shepherd of the Lake Church. We know that that venue might attract a certain demographic of individuals. We know that I did some at the library, I did some at coffee shops, etc. So we'll find ways to make sure that we're spreading ourselves out so that we are covering as much ground as we possibly can, not only with a variety of folks throughout our community, but also throughout time frames. So we want to make sure that we are doing sessions in the evening, sessions during the daytime, and perhaps there might be an opportunity to do a session on a weekend, just to accommodate a variety of work schedules that we know exist throughout our community. I would also say that over these months, this is where we would take advantage of participatory evaluation feedback. So there might be opportunities, for example, at the high school where we might put a QR code on the cafeteria tables and engage students about their thought process on master calendars or elective schedules. just to get some specific feedback, on a certain topic. Or there might be some broader templates that we put together. Waiting in line to get into a band concert, on the concert outside the doors, could be a QR code or could be something in the program itself. So we'll take advantage of captive audiences where we know we have participation so that we're covering, like I said, covering as much ground as we possibly can. So that month of February will be a deep, kind of broad engagement around the strategic planning. That information, we as a senior administrative team, have conversations with Casey and her team to talk about how do we synthesize this information to then bring this to the core planning team in March. And so through that iterative process, we would then structure the core team meeting that would happen around March 19th is what we have targeted here. Based upon that conversation with the core planning team, again, using their historical knowledge, practice knowledge, whatever expertise you might bring, the binder of information, in addition to the synthesized data that we've collected from our community, they're going to make meaning through a co-interpretive process that allows us to go out through a second wave of engagement with our community with a more refined scope based upon the feedback that we hear from the core design team from that March meeting. So essentially going back out in March to repeat what we did in February with a very narrowed focus on areas. Ask more about this. We heard enough about this. No need to waste time there. We want to make sure that we're capturing this particular audience. Let's hear more from students. Let's hear more from parents, whatever it might be. That conversation will take place to whittle it down to how we narrow that engagement on our second pass in March. Again, similar to our first session, senior team would go through an iterative process with Casey and team to put forth an opportunity for our April meeting in the core planning team. And that core planning team would be the opportunity for the group to do some initial framing of a strategic plan, kind of like the straw man version of what that could potentially look like. In addition to that, the senior team, administration team, would be there more as participant observers to kind of hear the conversations, to see how it gets structured. That allows us to hear that last component from that core design team for us as a senior team to make meaning of what we just heard from that design team, to finalize and bring some, tying up some ends, if you will, from what we heard from that initial framing, so that we can come back to the core team with our feedback from the administration side of things to say, okay, from that initial framing, here's what we heard, here are some things that we would suggest, here are some pointers that we would kind of help guide, and then that core planning team would have their first draft that would be ready for sharing to the school board in May. Based upon that engagement with the board at the study session and feedback that you all would have, that information would then come back to the senior team and Casey to plan out how we would bring that information in a structured way to the core team to say, here's what the board's responses were, here are some areas that they would like to see better refinement or clarity, etc., verbiage, all of that. They would have that finalized draft by end of May. They would then be prepared to bring it back to the board for final approval in June. And that would be kind of the arc and cadence of the process for the strategic planning to come to you all for a final vote in June. Now, mind you, there's a lot going on during this same time frame that we're very mindful of, but also I think very parallel to the work of strategic planning. So as you all know, we've expedited our budgeting process. So conversations around budget will be opening up early February, mid-February at the latest. So budgeting conversations are happening during this time frame. I'm sure there will be intersectionality between budget conversations and strategic planning conversations in formal ways of how we're engaging with community, as well as what we bring forward, into our core planning team conversations. We also know staffing is parallel to budget, so a lot of staffing conversations will be happening simultaneously. Again, you can see the intersectionality of where a lot of that will kind of bleed into the conversations that are happening with strategic planning, because programming, as you know, are people are programs, so they're very synonymous in education. So that will be a track. I would also say that there will be two other areas that will be working potentially in parallel. One is our partnership with World Savvy and developing our learner attributes. So I think we first brought this conversation to the board under the term graduate profile. Since our conversation, we've broadened that out to be learner profile, because learners can be our students, learners are also the adults, learners are also people in the district, learners are also our community. So when we talk about the attributes of bringing a community together and what we expect to see in our students as they walk out the door with, exceptional academic opportunities, but also the character to match, what does that look like? And should we not, as adults, be modeling that same thing? So it's an opportunity for us to really embed that learner profile into the strategic planning work. That would come late spring, where we would see those two paths likely converge. And then lastly, and you've heard Tammy talk a little bit about this, there are about 3 pathways around the budget conversation that we can have. Around what we know is inevitably going to happen if we do nothing with the projections and just holding as is. And we have probably a mid case and best case, however you want to term these, various scenarios of the budget that will be framed as possible conversations for the board to entertain. Do we go forward around a levy conversation with our community as well? And so some of that work would be beginning around mid-spring, when we start gauging some of the work that's coming out through our community conversations, but then some of that active test polling that usually happens around mid-spring with levies, because all of that conversation, if this is the direction that the board and community want to support, believe needs to come to the board by June 30th or June 15th. Sorry, June 15th. So there's a lot that's happening. All very critical work, all very manageable work, but nonetheless, it's very critical work. And it's work that will really set the cadence for us for generations to come for long-term sustainability and long-term success. So I just wanted to give mention to some of that. That's not on this timeline, but know that this is work that's in the hopper. That will be parallel and likely converge at various points throughout this process, beginning in January. So with that, Chair Cosby, I will open it up for conversation.
And I'll open it up to the board directors for questions. I do want to clarify, when you were, I think you spoke to this, but I just want to touch on it. In February, where it lists community engagement, it lists Rotary, and really that's as an example, is what I think I heard you say.
And I want to be clear on this too. Like, I wasn't trying to be suggestive or saying that they will have to be a part of this. It really should say community stakeholders, because they are part of this community. We are a value add and a service to this community, whether it's through our formal engagement through community education, or through our partnerships with Chamber, partnerships that we have with some of our schools, with community groups. Obviously, we're a stakeholder.
It's a for example.
This was a for example, but we'll definitely clear this up to talk about in a broader sense. I don't want to be prescriptive.
We don't want to be narrow.
Was not meant to be prescriptive.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'll open it up to the board. Back.
Question. So it was included in our board packet, what's included in the strategic plan. And it lists vision, pillars, priorities, goals, and mission. And so I'm curious if our strategic plan, once completed, like I'm looking at our current and there's kind of like 3 pillars. And this is like 4 boxes. And I'm wondering if that is kind of representative of what it will look like.
It could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 2 big ones, it could be, I mean, that's really, it's not contained to that. I think that's where the design team will come forward and to say, how do we want to bracket our priorities? You know, so yeah, don't be wedded on the current visual, but this is exactly why we want to give the core design team, you know, our current plan, obviously, but here's some examples of what others look like. You know, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Every strategic plan pretty much says the same thing. I think the key thing here, that sounds like I'm watering this process down, and I don't mean to sound that way, but it's they're similar in design, reflective of the values and priorities of each unique community. That's a better way of saying it. And I would say the companion document that's more at the administrative level is the scorecard. And I think that's the actual piece of how do we then bring measures to strategy level, not granular stuff, but strategy level. And that's the piece that we're currently working with Casey and team on right now. That, again, I would say many districts have very similar priority areas of focus. Operations, human resources, academics, etc. How we measure for that will be nuanced based upon the district and kind of what our current state is. So,
And with Studer, obviously Studer's facilitating for that core design team to help them figure
They
out
are.
if it looks like this or if it looks like
they
this,
are.
or
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment? So we currently have all of that in ours. The difference is the operational components that probably we want to take out because they're not typical. But we have a vision/mission statement, then we have our pillars and the goals under each pillar. So technically we have all that, and that's your typical layout for a strategic plan. But I wanted to, you know, it's with all these things that are coming together, I don't want to boil the ocean with the strategic plan because it does come out fairly succinct, but the language that's used actually says the goals based upon our community. So how we say it, it's kind of like the top of a pyramid. Everything else builds up to it. If you're not doing things that are going to support that, that informs then your budget. It informs how you staff. It informs where you put people in the program. And I want to, a couple of things that you said about, you know, the graduate or learner profile and all that. But I want to come back into that with what is and is not, or are and are not on that slide, because it's really easy to confuse the strategic plan to be all-inclusive and basically boil the ocean. And that's where I would be dependent upon Studer to make sure that didn't happen, to be very distinct and prescriptive in each one of those pillars and goals underneath the pillar. And also we didn't conflate operational or current state, current economic concerns in there, because you want it to kind of override. You want this to last the test of time, basically. It should live in its current language for at least 5 years, and every year, of course, we run into a new challenge, opportunity for growth. So that's the only thing that I would want to make sure that we're all aware of, is that you can't boil the ocean with this. You cannot be all
Can I just so we're on the same page, when you're saying boil the ocean, are you saying including so many things? Is that what you're?
Right, you need to get your priorities,
And
focus
I
on those,
appreciate
yeah.
that, because when I think of, you know, when I, even just looking at the, there's so many things that goes into the strategic plan. There's so many things that you can boil the ocean with, right? And I like to think of things as, what are the filters, right? When we're looking for, student success, academic success, whatever, whatever encapsulates our strategic plan, what are the filters we're using? And that we're not boiling the ocean, because it gets exhaustive, confusing, and then you lose your focus, and it's kind of like, okay, then where are we going, right? So I appreciate that.
I would love to hear more, realizing it's still a work in progress, but I would love to hear more of the kind of things that's going to be on the application for the core team members. Would love to hear about how you envision that process and questions that you might be asking, as well as maybe a timeline of that when you want to kind of have your core team in place.
I'll start with the last question, kind of work backwards. We want to have our core team in place by the end of December, so that we can do some engagement and kind of level set training on the first part of January with them, and give them their reading assignments, their asynchronous work to engage in during the month of January. The type of questions that will be on the application, I actually have a draft of it, but I don't have it pulled up right now, but I'll say, general demographic information: who are you, name, where do you live, do you have kids in the district, yes or no, if so, what level, what schools, so we kind of know that general aspect of the individual. We also might ask questions about, like, what do you do? I stay at home, I work in accounting, I am a construction worker, just so we understand kind of perspectives that they might be bringing to the conversation from a professional standpoint. We've also asked whether, we've debated whether or not we ask any information about, where did you go to school, if you went to school, just so we have a sense of their background, training, majors, etc. There will be some open-ended short response questions, generally asking, why are you interested in this core design team? We would also be asking questions of, what expertise do you bring to the core design team? Maybe you are a strategic planning consultant, and you probably want to put that on the application, right? Things of that nature, or other expertise areas that they might bring. Maybe you're an accountant in budgeting, and obviously budgeting will be a conversation that will come up. Maybe not completely baked into the strat plan specifically, but we'll be talking about some of these things. So that will be something that we'll be asking. Christy, are you around? There are a couple more things I might be blanking on. Do you have it pulled? Oh, you pulled it up? There it is. Thank you. Sorry, we were literally just in this morning. We talked about PLSAS priding itself on bringing diverse perspectives to the table for discussion that represent all members of our community. Share specific examples where you've been inclusive of bridging differences for the betterment of the community, or outcomes for all. We talked about relevance, specific skills, and I think that's really about it. Oh, then at the very end, there is a statement of commitment that we're putting in there, saying, by joining this team, I'm adhering to be collaborative in spirit, being a learner at the table, supporting decisions, that kind of thing. Because again, with 40 people, you're not going to get consensus, right? And we need folks to be able to have some spirited discussion at the table. But then also, when we walk out of that room, we're stacking hands. So we can disagree all day long inside, but when we say this is what we're going public with, you support that, and similar to the cadence that you all do as a board. When you make decisions as a board. However you individually might feel, that's how you individually feel. But as a board, as one body, same with this. As this core planning team, as one body, they go out. This is what they support. So we have that declaration at the very end as well. Not that, you know, it means anything legally, but it's that commitment.
And then a call out on the time commitment too.
We talk, oh yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talk about the meeting schedules. We also talk about, we have the dates on there. We also talk about, and the times. We also say that there could be opportunities to have smaller breakout groups and just want folks to be open to that. So we might do, you know, there might be one of the pillars and say, okay, I want the 4 of you, you take this pillar, okay? Do some digging, some homework on this. 3 of you, you take pillar 2. And so we might have some of that, not guaranteed, but we just want to gauge the flexibility, and we understand life happens. So that's why we're also making it bigger, so we can have a critical mass always there, knowing that life's going to happen. Sick kids, got caught up at work, you know, whatever. So that's part of that on the front side as well. So
I have a question also.
Yeah.
So when we did our committees, we had a robust application pool, and not everybody was able to be selected. With the applicants, if they already serve on a committee, because all of our committees are all brand new, will they be able to serve also on the strategic planning committee, or will we be looking at people who were not selected for the committees?
I think that's a good question. You know, I think it's important to get different perspectives. So that will be a priority. I think that's actually, with that question, that might actually be a good question for the application.
That's what I was gonna
Do
say.
you
You might
currently
wanna
serve
add.
on any PLSAS district committee?
Yeah.
Or even have you.
Or have you? Again, not that we want all new players, we know there's gonna be some crossover, but I do wanna make sure that, I mean, this is the committee that's going to help determine the strategic framework, to Mary's point, for generations. Like, if this is done right, there's some tweaks, but that shouldn't change. Your scorecards may change very frequently. Some of your operations work may change very frequently, but like, you think about companies, their mission is their mission. Their vision, they hold to it. You know, changeovers of CEOs, CFOs, all those, they stay the course. So that is something that I think we can consider as a design team to say, what has staying power? Because along with this, not a completely, you know, rebranding of things, but this is going to be our brand
Right.
in this post fill-in-the-blank era of education,
Right.
of how we, you know, maintain and continually improve as PLSAS strong. So there's a lot of stake in that. So very good question. Thank you.
Yeah,
And,
well, I
and
know
I'll make
there's
sure.
a specific community member or parent
Yeah.
who applied for 2 of the 3 committees and never was selected.
Mm-hmm.
And this individual was also involved back in 2017 during the
Mm-hmm.
referendum. So I think, personally, I think if you currently serve on a committee,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should open it up. I mean, we have 8,000
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
16,000 parents, and we have, I think we'll be able to
Yeah.
fill these committees without a problem, is
I-
my personal opinion. And then I wanted to ask Casey, with the strategic plan, who owns the strategic plan? Is it a board plan, or is it owned by administration? Like, is that, I'd like to get clarification around that.
Yeah, really great question. So ultimately, you as a board approve those priorities, but what Dr. Thomas has alluded to around that scorecard is really this opportunity that we have to partner together with your strong administrative team to create this cadence of bringing back results to you as a board and to the community to have this ongoing conversation around what the progress towards achieving those goals is on an ongoing basis, right? So you as a board are going to need a level of update for your level of governance to understand how the plan is moving forward. And there will be deeper layers, we call that line of sight, to other leaders, other buildings, other departments in the organization that will be very detailed to their work. But you're likely to see a very high-level view of that so that you're able to understand progress from the board table.
Right, and then do our board members of the core team? My understanding from other districts, and speaking on other districts, depending upon the quorum, they would have let's say for us, 3 board members as part of the strategic planning team?
I've always experienced board members being a part of the core planning team.
Okay.
So I've never been in a district where that wasn't the case.
And how was that determined then?
That's determined uniquely by each board. Every board's different of how they
So
pick members.
our board determines that?
Yeah, similar, I mean, I would treat this as your district, the board committees that you have assignments that you all sit on. So again, dispersing some of that. But yeah, that's always been the case, and if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also governed by policy. So you own the strategic plan as a board through policy. The management plan, score, all that's management.
So when does that get determined then?
Well, that would be up to us, and then we would, right? I mean, as a board, we would determine how many reps are on there, and we would also think about it, in my opinion, in the context of the other committees we serve on, right? So kind of making sure we can all cover all the work and representation. Yeah.
Question on the makeup of this. So in building strategic plans, and in my experience professionally, you have this strategic plan and then tactics, how you're going to do it, right? So our strategy is obvious, our strategies, as it were, in our strategic plan, and then the tactics are kind of what our scorecard is. Is that a fair way to say it?
Sure.
Because I just want to make sure that we're thinking like, yes, this core team, here's our strategies, here's our mission and vision, go do it. I just want to make sure, or go execute it, go implement it. I just want to make sure there's thought processes involved, like, can this be executed? Can this be envisioned in, like, the actual doing of the plan,
So,
as it were?
no, I think that's a fair question. Let me see if I can repeat it back a little differently. So when you set your strategic framework for the district, the companion, the scorecard are like your measurable outcomes based upon each kind of priority area. And from there, that's where, going back to that arrow slide, where we have greater alignment. So from there, if these are our ultimate metrics that we're trying to accomplish, how do you back map that all the way down to the department level, to the school level, to the classroom level, et cetera. So when a school is writing their school improvement plan, the alignment piece would say, here's our school improvement plan. It aligns to our district strategic plan, pillar 1, and scorecard measure 2A. I'm just throwing these numbers out there so that you see everything that I do in my individual classroom completely feeds the district level strategic plan so that we are a connected system. We're a school district, not a district of schools. And that first example of arrows where great folks doing a lot of hard work and rowing like crazy. Are we all going to get to the same destination? We may, but we can't leave learning to chance. We can't leave success to chance. So it's very important that with this plan, we have our metrics as guides to say, okay, here are the targets. Now, Dan takes those targets to his academic departments and starts setting forth, okay, what does this look like for ELA? What does this look like for math? Okay, I'm a principal at Jeffers Pond, just using JP because it's the closest school I live to. So JP, principal says, all right, so here are the district metrics. Now, what does this mean? What is my contribution to making sure that we meet these metrics? And you've actually heard JP talk about this when they presented last year. And so everyone is working in sync towards that common goal.
So to that end, are teachers and staff going to be represented on the core team? Or
Yes.
are they part, and great, do they apply the same as
Yes.
anybody else? Okay.
So the thought behind the application process is to kind of weight it based upon demographics. So we want, our stakeholders of our parents being a large portion, okay? So just, let's say that's 2/3 of the community. I'm just throwing that out because that's how the TNL is. Then from there, we want to make sure we have elementary representation of staff and secondary representation of staff. We want licensed staff, we want non-licensed staff, we want administration. We have district staff. So that maybe takes, a quarter, okay? Then we also know, or a third, whatever, and then, or whatever, a quarter. And then we also have another portion that's opened up to the community that we want to just have kind of community at large. I might be a grandma in the community, I might be a business owner in the community, I might be a pastor in the community, whatever my role might be, but I'm a tax-paying citizen who has a vested interest in the district, right? So that aspect would be, so we would kind of weight against the demographic. So a parent isn't competing with a teacher, right? And I think that's the only difference that's nuanced with our current committee structures. It's just an open casting call of a set target number. We will weight this based upon demographic of applicant. So parents will compete with parents. I hate to say that word compete, but that's how we'll pick them. And then community at large, staff with staff, et cetera. Again, I think that's how we can guarantee the best mix and balance that represents our community, to the best of our ability.
So going back to the application process, if the board is going to determine which board members are part of the court process, I'm assuming that could be potentially, that would have to be at our December board meeting, correct?
So I think,
We only have one board meeting in December.
right, so the way I thought of it, and we discussed, but I don't think I feel like it's on the table for discussion because obviously it's board decision, but we have our organizational meeting in January, and board members would give indication as to where they want to participate on the various committees, and we would add this as one.
So
And then board members would say, teaching and learning strategy or whatever.
So then do we need to update our policy 213?
No, because it says ad hoc committees from
Okay,
the
so
board.
this would be an ad hoc.
It's, so
Okay.
that's been done in the past with like the district task force with the referendum in the past. And,
So
yeah.
with the applicants, who's going to will the board have visibility to the applicant list and final approval on the applicant list? Because if the core members are not part of it
It's
until
an ad hoc
January-
board committee, so the board would approve the roster.
So the whole
Similar-
board is
similar.
going to approve the roster?
Yes.
So we'll see.
And
in
that would
January.
happen in January.
Yeah,
That would make sense to happen.
I would envision it like the.
Because they don't meet till January 23rd.
Mhm.
And our meeting is, I think, the 11th.
Mhm.
And remember, this is an ad hoc committee that actually ends in June, so it's not something that goes the whole year. So we have to take that into consideration too with regards to allocation on the committees.
Yeah, so something, if I may offer for the board to consider, again, every district has its own unique structure. I have been a part of a district where there was, that core design team met once annually at the very beginning of the year to kind of look at the strategic priority work. To your point, Mary, can't boil the ocean, but what's an area based upon the data that we know that we really want to hone in on? And that might be something that you all consider as well. Just to declare, this is a priority that, we're going to do a lot of stuff, but this thing, whatever it might be an area that we really want to double down on because we heard this through stakeholder feedback or we saw this from whatever. Just something to consider whether it goes year-round.
Would that be a strategic planning committee, or I'm sorry, a strategic engagement, I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. A community engagement committee, is that what you're referring to?
It's not, actually.
okay.
It's very tied to the strategic planning process.
It
I
would
thought you meant
be-
going forward.
It would extend.
Even going forward,
It
it's
would
still.
extend this into the beginning of the school year, just to
Cor-
ensure
correct.
fidelity with.
Right.
Correct.
That what happens is what was the intention of the core
Right,
planning
I
team.
understand.
Right, and so then it is kind of done like mid-fall,
Right.
so to speak, in a formal
But the
way.
hard hours of labor, of course, are.
Is done in June.
By June,
Right.
yeah.
And I just want to add that in my experience, when we've had that happen and other places too, that the group that meets is not once the board approves the strategic plan, it has to stay. It's not like you're looking at the strategic plan and going, okay, now let's tweak it.
Changes,
It's really
yeah.
the scorecard and the allocation of resources to support the strategic plan to make sure we're all on track. It's not to reinvent the wheel
Sure.
during the meeting time.
So
That's-
to that point,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry, I think it's quick.
Go ahead, yeah.
To that point, when does this say everything happens according to the sheet and no, disruptions or delays or anything like that? Is this like what, a July 1st kind of take effect?
So July, yeah, so I would say that July and August would be our kind of branding, ribbon cutting of the new thing. So it would be September that we would do the big kickoff of our welcome back to the school year. This is where we would do like the big formal reveal. So yes, there would be an approval in June. That would be your soft opening, if you will. And then the grand opening would be at the beginning of school. And again, not that it has to be done this way, but in places where I've been, when you have a new strategic plan, it is a big kind of community deal. So like I've opened up districts in the Excel or the likes of that, and the entire community came out to support a brand new, like, here we go.
Okay, thank you.
So it varies.
I just want to get clarification on what Director France said. So were you referring to that once the strategic plan is set, it doesn't get tweaked or changed for the next 5 years, is that correct? Because I was confused when Dr. Thomas came in, I thought there was some tweaking of our current strategic plan.
No, what I.
It was, I mean, I'm not
No,
saying that's
what I
good or
did-
bad, but I always thought, I was
No.
also under the assumption that it stays as
No,
written.
no,
or as put in
everything
place.
stayed the same. We subordinated the operational plan from the
Oh,
strategy
okay.
work. Because what was happening is we were reporting, again, as I understand it, all these operational data points that really weren't driving strategy. I would say it was more aligned to core functional work or the cost of doing business. And so we subordinated that to the ops plan, and then we kept all the two areas of the current strategic plan focused. That's more of the strategic area of work. And so we reported on that through our quarterly data reports. And my commitment to the board when I came in was, we're in our last 2 years. Unless you see otherwise, I intend to see this through. Because I don't want to be that suit that comes in and changes
Thanks
it.
for clarifying that. I do
Yeah.
recall that it was the white piece of paper, not the core values, the vision, and the strategic.
Yeah, all that
Okay.
stays.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
And then I have a question also about, so will these meetings for the core team, will they be open to the public? Will all the meetings be open to the public? Because, I mean, if you only have 40 people on,
I think all
will
our
they
committee
be
meetings are.
scheduled and open for the public?
I've never had that, but doesn't mean it can't be. I mean, things have changed, so. There was no participation. I take that back. Oh, maybe that was a policy committee. Yeah, I mean,
Our
I think that's the
committee
will of the
meetings
board.
are all open.
Yeah, so just keep
They
this one
are.
open as well.
And they're all
Yeah.
announced 3 days ahead of time or whatever.
Well, yeah, this is this is an ad hoc committee. I don't know how, if you want to subject it to your same formal structure, that's totally up to you all. But I just want to be clear with the community that if you come, you're an observer to the process, similar to the committee structures that exist now.
Right.
We have plenty of cooks in the kitchen. But yeah, if people want to observe the process.
And as long as so I'm with Dr. Thomas, I've seen these types of committees in public and nonprofits and education be open to the public and not. And sometimes the core team chooses for them not to be because the public is so divided, or there's potentially political pressures or whatever where they don't feel comfortable talking freely in the group. So I don't know how everyone feels about making it public. I do know that the process of the committee applications and things like that where, people want to be able to participate without having, the reason why we have Braver Angels in there, they want to be able to participate without harassment, so to speak, and that the definition of that varies by comfort level of each individual. But in order to allow people to come in and be as open and honest as possible, and all that, we do need to take that in consideration. And I do think that's the core reason why we have Braver Angels in there, to make sure that we can have that type of conversation within the group itself.
It is, and I, from what I understand, I don't believe that was open in the past. In Casey, I don't know what you've seen across the country with various districts.
Yeah, I would say it ranges. The majority of those, and I've done those, Midwest, Oregon, California, the majority of the core planning meetings are closed for a number of reasons, many of which you've mentioned. But also there'll be, that they're active processes. Like, we want the core planning team in there looking at the information, having the freedom to have discussions, to ask questions. So I would say that most often I've experienced them to be closed, but not always.
And just to make the referendum committees were closed. They only by invite and only by application were people in there. I don't believe we had board members on that at that time. I think maybe the chair came in or something, but I don't know. I don't think we had board members on those committees either. I'm not sure. I think I gotta go back and look.
I don't think so either.
I don't remember board members being involved.
No.
My biggest concern is, and I'm just gonna be really transparent and candid here, there has been a complete lack of trust. And there's transparency, builds trust with the community. And so I think the more open we can be with the process, I think it's gonna build trust, and I think you're gonna get better buy-in from the community. We all go to committee members, we all go to committee meetings, and 1 or 2 people show up who want to be informed. It's not like you're having 30 people show up and riot at a meeting. And so I've lived in the community for the past 11 years. I've lived through the district, lived through a campaign where the biggest thing I've heard is the lack of trust that has formed over the past, say, 8 years in this district. And I think the only way to turn around this ship, and Dr. Thomas, you've been a really great leader in coming in and touting transparency. And I think the only way to continue to build that trust is to continue to be transparent with our community throughout this process.
Do we have to make that decision? Can we leave it up to the core team and what they want to do?
So I think this is.
I just don't know. I'm asking a process
the
question.
strategic,
I
my
don't
understanding
know.
is that the board owns the strategic planning process. So that is a board's decision, is my understanding.
I actually like Jessica's idea of leaving it up to the core team. To be blunt, I was wholly uncomfortable with bringing up individual members and discussing their qualifications or not at a public board meeting, because we're basically putting those people on display in a way that they're trying to, contribute, and I've got some feedback that they were very uncomfortable with those lists and things like that. Here they are trying to contribute. So I'd like
Committees
to.
you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, we need to be cognizant of that. We want the community to be involved. We don't want them to be, the members that do want to speak up and apply, and after the team goes through the process of making sure there's a proper demographic population sample that's going to benefit the district, I think part of the trust is having us trust that process. So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, I mean, when we
yeah.
talk about transparency, I can see it both ways. When we talk about transparency, what's important is what's brought forward, and that we as a board are really thoughtful about what's brought forward in our approval. So that's the very important piece that we must be transparent about. So I mean, I can see what you're saying, and I understand the value of open meetings. I also don't think there would be a lot of people attending, so I'm trying to, reconcile that in my head, but I
Based on this
also.
timeline, nobody's gonna see anything, the public won't see anything until May, if I'm correct. I mean, that's when the first, correct me wrong, that's when they bring it to the board?
Well,
Is
it
it
would
May?
come back, they would have input in February, it would come back to them in March, right? With
we
some
come
refinements.
with some refinements.
But I mean,
Yeah.
as far as the public, imagine general public person who's not on the core team, the only time they would see it is in May at a school board review.
Wait a minute, no, I don't think that was the intent.
Well,
With the community engagement, the core team, what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Casey, and maybe I totally misunderstood this. The process, and Dr. Thomas described this, but you guys put this process together, that when they go out and gather the information comes back to the core team to be synthesized, and then it goes back out to the community to be further refined, and we try to incorporate, especially in that last box, incorporate feedback from as many
Well,
different
and
groups in the community as
if we're
possible.
looking at dates, it really
Yeah.
doesn't, the final final information is started, initial framing for the plan is April 16th. And the core planning team first draft of the plan is May 7th. So the core planning team isn't really, they're taking in information and deciphering it. And it's really April 16th that they're putting pen to paper.
Right. And
So that's not that long.
Yeah, I mean, just the way I envision it is if I'm a parent in the community and I don't have the time to make the 40-person applicant all these meetings and make a commitment to the core team, I as a parent might want to pop into one of the meetings just to get an update and hear what's being talked about. And then maybe lend an ear to my friend who's on the committee and say like, hey, I attended the meeting, here's some ideas or some suggestions. And all of a sudden you're engaging your community versus closing it off just to that core team.
Yeah, I would say,
And
yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I've talked to a couple different districts and they have been open to the public.
Mhm.
So that's why I know as a district, we have a lack of trust. And the more transparent we can be,
Yeah.
we build that trust with our community, which is gonna help with asking for a levy. It's gonna help with,
I think there's
all
a
the
lot of engagement and opportunities for feedback in the course of 2 months where general public at large will be at various events. And the core, again, April 16th, we're talking about 3 weeks that they're going to be refining that plan. So it's not like they set the plan in February and they just sit on it and they just keep tweaking, behind closed doors. So I want to be clear. The intention is to have a lot of community input on the data gathering side. You can't have everybody, fine tuning it and framing it. You have to have that to a select group and even perhaps, like I was saying earlier, break out some of those groups. But the data feed needs to be broad. That's where I think the transparency, in my opinion, is most critical, on the front side.
The other question I have, and I'm interrupting you, sorry. Did you have more you wanted to add?
Nope. I'll stop.
The other question I have, because I think this is very relevant to the task force referendum work, is there a confidentiality piece around any information that might be shared?
Yeah, that's part of that. That's part of the checkbox at the end, because there are things that are going to be said and/or processes discussed that aren't ready for public consumption. They're kind of in that test phase. And if I pop in for one meeting and I hear that, that's my gospel. And I'm going back out and I'm saying, hey, this, and this is happening. Well, wait, there's some context here. And I think that gets back to your point.
Theoretical scenarios.
Yeah, so I'm mindful of that. I agree transparency is key. I mean, there's no doubt in my leadership. That's who I am as a person, as a leader. I think the critical aspect of transparency is on that data gathering phase. The framing phase is where we take everything that we've heard from community through multiple opportunities to kind of put ears, whether it's through cafes, through online surveys, through QR codes, whatever it might be, all these unique ways. Now we have to put some refinement on this. So, and there's just not a lot of time. So something for you all to consider,
Can I ask
how you want to.
quick question? I think one
Revise.
of the concerns that I think I'm hearing, which I would agree with, is that on the school board review on the May 20th study session, I don't think anybody wants a surprise, you know, that sort of thing. So how do we tamper that so that it's not,
Yeah.
you know, you're not, again, drinking from a fire hose with a strategy.
Casey has a
Yeah,
comment.
thank you.
And you may, I'm sure you have a procedure and a policy for how you share highlights or summaries of different committee meetings that you are not able to attend as individual board members. So there may already be a process in place for that. And I'm sure Dr. Thomas is already thinking of what I'm going to offer. Sometimes what I see other superintendents do is provide a short update to the board at each of the in-between board meetings on a high-level summary of the process, right? So that might be how many folks that they've engaged with in the community as part of the community engagement sessions. It might be sharing where the group is at in the process of forming the pillars, some of the very, very, very high-level themes that are emerging, so that you as a board feel connected to the process as it moves through its pretty ambitious cadence. So that's just something I've seen work in other districts as well.
So Casey, this is actually where I was going to go around our super board reports. So at every one of our business meetings, we have that structure in place. So aside from the one-on-one check-in times to do briefings on, you know, key issues, but then the community at the board meeting would be able to hear some of those status updates as well. And going back, which I would assume would be protocol of the core design team, because they'll set protocols as how they operate. What's for public consumption and what do we agree upon that leaves this room and what is not, and that frames the report structure. So if I go out to a formal way and or if I'm on the committee and someone asks me, I know there's only these 3 things that we've agreed to share publicly in my informal spaces as a community member or in my formal space as SUP or, you know, members as a board.
And I would advocate for that to happen at a business meeting versus a study session.
Correct.
Because then a study
That's
session
where the reports
becomes
are.
another ad hoc core team meeting
Yeah.
with, you know, and I think,
Well, and that's where reports are in the agenda.
right.
Always
yeah,
at
so I,
business.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I disagree.
So that's
You were nodding your head back and forth and looking. Did you have anything to add? Because I know you
I
were
do.
through the referendum as well as the
Yeah, for sure.
redistricting and all
Yeah, no, I
that
was
stuff.
thinking of the transparency piece, because these are all Tuesday evenings, 4-hour sessions, so in that situation, if the parent is not able to participate fully and they're only able to attend a part of the meeting, they might gather some information, but that information by the end of the meeting might be false. It might change, because just kind of thinking through the referendum piece, we might have made a decision earlier on or have some sort of agreement that, yes, this is the path forward, but then we discovered an unintended consequence that that decision might have when we got to a different section that we were discussing and came back and made adjustments to that specific decision. So I think that there's value in talking to the team members or the core team members if they know who those individuals are and getting kind of what's the latest scoop on what's going on. Having the board updates or the superintendent updates of here's the synopsis of where we are today and the key trade-offs or the buy-offs or whatever we want to phrase it, the key decisions that we've made at that point, I think was also extremely helpful.
I appreciate that. I mean, my belief is we have nothing to hide, and so we're a public entity. So my belief is I believe they should be open. I understand your perspective. Perhaps we could create a webpage, just like we did with the negotiations, where we're consistently updating information on there about the process of the, the strategic plan process. And-
Yeah, and that way, if I'm not at a board meeting or whatever, if I had to leave early, it's all right here, and this is the public consumption, this is the public facing, yeah.
The bulk of the work is quite public, especially on the
Yeah.
front end, which is important, and then on the board, decision end. But I think that, a website to communicate information.
We'll definitely
Great.
put that into our mix
Yeah.
of design.
Yeah, and then the last thing is, I watched Jordan go through their strategic planning process, and the one thing that I was super impressed with, and I know that we've been challenged with in our district, is how they created secure surveys. And I can share some information with you. I know I've shared some information with you, Dr. Thomas, but I think it's critical in the strategic planning process that our surveys that we send out to either parents or community members, that there is a way to ensure that they are only completed once by each person, that they actually live in our district, and that they're secure. And I believe the way Jordan did it is they gave each parent a code that they enter or something. I mean, I can find out more information. I know you're connected to the superintendent down there in Jordan, but I think, again, that builds trust with our community, knowing that this truly is our community's strategic plan, and it's not being driven by people who don't live within our community.
I think my only caveat or challenge to that too, not the secure part, but I want to make sure our open enrolled families have a say in this.
Yeah, and that's
strategic
why,
plan.
yeah, I was thinking
So
about
not
that.
necessarily live in our
Yeah,
district.
and that's
but
why I
like-
said parent, because then they would get a
They're the
code as
state,
well,
yeah.
right?
You have a student
Yeah.
enrolled there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And this is off topic, but I just want to add that when that has happened, because when you give a code, their answers are traceable, all that kind of stuff, that also led to a trust factor for them being open and honest and knowing who made what comment and stuff like that. So there's a trade-off either way, and that's a much broader discussion when you give a code and their answers can be traced back, and you're telling them that whatever they say is 100% confidential and anonymous and stuff like that, and then you can trace everything they did and said and what even machine they logged into, and you're holding that personal data. So
Yeah,
there's pros and cons to that, and that's off topic with the security and the survey thing and what we're doing here, but I think the theme of that kind of leads into people also being comfortable sharing things and why so many do make the core team not public. So it's a cultural thing by community, and I would like to, personally, I'm gonna go back to that. I would like to leave that whole conversation up to the core team and have a much more robust discussion and have them have a say, kind of. I think that would be important, because I can't speak, I don't know what comfort level is. I'm a little bit more bold than the majority of people I know, so I'm not a good I couldn't make that decision on behalf of somebody else.
And I would just say, given the feedback we received in our survey, the 6,000 plus comments that we received, knowing that we are a public entity and that when anybody writes something into our district, it is public, I don't think people are hesitant to share their information of what they want to do to help improve our school district, to see it improved. So, so I personally would like to see them secure, because I know we've had issues in the past. And I don't want to get specific about that, but even during the superintendent search, I believe there was 10 surveys, don't quote me, 10 surveys from the board members, and there's only 7 board members on the board. So, like I said, there's been a lack of trust, and we need to do what we can during this process to build that trust so we can get buy-in from our community.
I'm excited about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, feedback
be
from
fun.
other board members.
Yeah, one additional comment, just kind of thinking of the secure survey component. I know in the past we've kind of tailored our surveys to current parents or parents of current students or those who recently graduated. We also have this other segment or even open enrolled. We also have this other segment who haven't had kids in school for a long time, who don't have kids in the district, who never had kids in the district. We don't want to isolate them and not invite them into the process as well.
Yeah.
So
There's
just trying to
ways,
think through different ways to
Jordan
make
did a
that
great
happen.
job of doing it. I think let's reach out to some of other districts to see how they've done this. Minnetonka's done it. Monte Vida just did it. Monte Vida, I believe, just went through their strategic planning process. This is not new to how to
Right.
create a secure survey, and you're
Well,
right.
and Studer's not new to this work
Right.
either.
Right,
so that's
exactly.
nice.
So Casey
Yeah,
probably has
Casey's
some great ideas she
listening,
can share
yeah.
with us, so.
I think I've got a good sense of going back to make some revisions based upon some feedback here tonight, some good suggestions. I think if I can, I will, on my superintendent update in December, just give an update on some of the changes that came forward. And then also through some of our one-on-ones prior to then. Okay.
When is the goal to get that out, like in the public, like applications or?
So our goal for the applications is the first week of December, to just have that out. Yeah.
And will that be advertised, like we've done such a good job in the past, like in the paper and social
Yep.
media and
Yeah, we'll
emails
put
and
it
all
out there.
things? Okay.
Right, right. And in terms of board representation, we'll, we can't have a quorum, right? So
Right,
it's a
so-
maximum of 3,
Right.
and given representation on other board committees, that's been 2, so it'll be 2 to 3 board members if we're all in agreement with that, and it may become obvious as we start creating the roster for the organizational meeting in January, so. In terms of representation, but 2 to 3 board members is the target. And
good.
also, I just want to add, because this is our role in our committee work, is that we are also, to a certain degree, observers and obviously, giving input and maybe giving context or asking questions, but I think that will also be the case in this work, that we'll be there to learn and listen and observe, so. I just felt the need to say that. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Casey.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Dr.
so
Casey.
much. Have a
Thank
lovely
Look forward to
evening.
working with you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to our 23-24 budget discussion, and I'll hand that off to Tammy, please.
Thank you. I've given you 2 documents, the original budget and the amended budget. You'll see that the amended budget, we're not changing anything in the general fund. While our enrollment is up from the ending enrollment on June 30th last year, we still are not quite at what we projected this year, so I don't want to make any revenue changes based on enrollment, because we still are getting open enrollment kids. I think we're right on track if we look at the spending compared to last year. It's very consistent. We will keep monitoring it. We're running payroll this week and the final accounts payable for November, so we'll have those ready to look at, make sure that we're still on track. But so far, we haven't seen anything that would indicate that we're going to not spend what we projected. The only difference is community education. They have made some adjustments in their revenue and their expenditures as they go through the year. And obviously, we put this budget together last spring. So as their kids have shown up, they can make some changes, adjustments to their fees that they're anticipating, and then also information on what they anticipate spending as the year goes forward. So they've updated those. So that's the only change that we have. They're still fine with their fund balance. They're still going to show, well, about $3 million at the end of this year for their fund balance. Food services, I should say, we're keeping it the same. However, there are a couple grants that we might be getting. I didn't want to include them at this time because we haven't gotten confirmation that we're for sure gonna get them, but there is a possibility that we could get some grants. But other than that, everything, like I say, we'll continue to monitor it. You'll get the financial statements every month. We're running analytical reports every month just to compare whether we're on track or not with what we projected. So we'll have this in the final vote on the December board meeting. As we see something coming up, this will be what we're gonna ask you to approve for the final budget.
When do you expect to hear on the grants?
It could be any time now. They're not big, so it's not really gonna have a huge impact, but there's a possibility that we could get a couple of grants.
So there may be just some small tweaks to the final budget.
Yeah, I don't really think they're enough to really tweak the budget.
What line item does Kids Co fall under ComEd?
It's under the regular community ed. However, they do not get, regular community ed gets some levy dollars, and Kids Co does not. They're fee-based. So it should be, technically, it should be a wash. What their revenue comes in should pay for their expenses. There's obviously going to be some differences, but as far as accounting, it would show up under the regular community ed line.
Tammy, I have a question. So can you help me understand, if we ended last year with 116 million in expenses, is that correct? June? I think it was projected at 111.9. We came in at 116.
It's actually 114.
Oh, 114 is where we ended? Okay. So 114, we made 4.7 million in new investments. And then we also have some estimate for teacher increases of about 3 million is my understanding. So we're at 7.7 million. How does the 114 plus 7.7 million equal 116?
So you're just looking at the
million?
additions, not the subtractions.
Yeah,
So
where do the
as-
subtractions come into play?
So when we got COVID money, we did a lot of one-time expenses that we paid with COVID, because obviously we're not gonna get those. There was some long-term facilities maintenance that we prepaid. We talked about that we were gonna spend the dollars last year and adjust the long-term facilities maintenance as we move forward. We've also made some reductions on some of our supplies. So we have made the cuts. Again, we're anticipating overspending our budget by about the 1.4 million that we asked you to approve out of fund balance. But everything else should be right on time.
So everything else that we projected to be over with new investments and, like I said, employee contracts, we've made cuts to whatever various things so that the numbers were only over by 1.5 million? Because we're basically deficit spending by 1.5 million.
About 1.4 was what the board
1.4.
approved. Yep.
So my question is, with all the new, so when we, as you recall, when we looked at the preliminary budget, and I voted no on the preliminary budget, because the district wasn't able to produce a 2 to 3 year forecast, and now that we've seen the 5-year forecast, I guess my question is have all the new investments been accounted for? Or
Yes.
is there anything we can go back and make adjustments to so that we can bring a balanced budget
We can
in
always,
December?
we can always make adjustments. I mean, salaries are gonna be hard to adjust because that means laying off staff. And there are some contractual agreements that prevent us from doing that. But we've certainly looked at all of the non-salary dollars that we have. We've made cuts where we needed to. I mean, it's, when you're building a budget, you're not gonna purposefully overspend your budget. We've estimated what our revenue's gonna look like. We're getting additional revenue this year. We've taken that into account. There's always enrollment changes. If they do come up, we'll make adjustments for that, but we haven't seen the enrollment adjustments that we think we need to make changes for. So again, we're looking at this every month. We have many analytical reports that we look at. We compare it with the last 2 years to see if we're on track for what we've spent. We are so far. We'll continue to monitor it. If we need to make other adjustments, we can. But again, there were many one-time expenses that we did last year, knowing that they were one-time expenses. So they're not carried forward into this year's budget because we're not going to pay for them again.
But weren't the personnel, the investments in personnel, which is mostly what we did, those are not one-time expenses?
No, and those are, we've included those in there. We've got all of the, again, when we build the budget, we're looking at everybody's salary. We have a document that has every person's salary listed. We have the percentage that we're anticipating. We've reanalyzed the fringe benefit rates. We're including those in there. So everything that we know we're going to have to spend is included in the budget. And then everything else becomes, can we afford this? Can we add that? Do we have to cut here? I mean, it's a huge, like I said, a huge jigsaw puzzle that we have to put together.
And everything in that 1.4, they were one time.
Correct.
They were not.
Yes, that was the decision that this
Yeah.
board made, that they would agree to the 1.4 for those one-time expenses.
And we listed out very discreetly in all of our pre-budget spreadsheets that we've received and agreed to the fund balance, which is frankly why we have the fund balance also the way it is. So it looks like it's deficit spending, but we do keep a fund balance for that purpose. So.
And hopefully, again, we're gonna get some additional revenue next year, but again, expenses are gonna continue to rise. We've seen the 5-year forecast. We have to make some decisions on whether it's, however, we're gonna have to cut some expenses if we're going to continue to try to balance the budget as we move forward.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that 1.4 million, and it wasn't all just one-time investments. We had the culture liaisons for 100,000.
That came out
Those
of
were from
federal.
grants.
Those were grants.
Well, I understand
That was
from
not
the
part of the
ANI.
1.4.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we had 1.5 English learner teachers, a half
That
English.
came out of Title III.
Okay, well, still, it's not just, I just want to clarify
Those
that these
weren't
are
the-
not just one-time
aren't
investments.
funds. Those aren't
part of the 1.4.
The way I understood it.
No, it wasn't part of the 1.4.
And the transportation contract increase for 339, and emergency preparedness and response, 159. And then math curriculum and labs, HP labs, for 545.
Those are all
Those are the
one-time.
Those are the one-time.
Yeah.
Those last two.
And
It's
that's
just,
real
I wish we
intentional,
would have been
you
able to
know.
see a 5-year forecast back then, and you can't, now we do know. I guess now we know as a board what we're looking at for the next 5 years. And we know that we're gonna have financial concerns, not in the next 3 to 4, but potentially 5, based on the information that we received.
And we're one of the few districts that does not have a tech levy. Our ops levy was understated from the beginning, so we have some greater challenges that other districts don't have. I mean, when you look at the per student spend, we are one of the lowest because we don't have the additional levies that our competing districts actually do have.
Well, let's be
So-
real clear, though. This past year for levies, not a lot of levies passed. It was an
Operating levies.
overwhelming amount of levies that did not pass.
For the operating.
For the
There
operating
was
levy.
more on the capital. that did
Correct,
pass.
correct. And we're talking operating, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
our
I just,
operating levy is 1/3 of what we could have.
again, the more we build the trust, the more we engage our community, the more they're gonna buy off on that type of,
I think we're all in
support.
agreement on that. You know, I think I think this board very much believes in those things. I think we're all in agreement on that. I think what we don't want to do when we talk about the next 3 to 4 years is spend down the general fund.
Correct.
So that we're sitting in a terrible position should we, you know, something horrible, you know, should we need that for something else, or, you know, that's just poor management. So while you're maybe, you know, I think it's unfair to say that we wouldn't have problems until year 5. You know, I think that's poor planning.
well, I
So
think
I
we
want to be
haven't,
mindful of that.
yeah, and we haven't seen all the what-if scenarios.
Right.
In fact,
Well-
there's one what-if scenario, you say, we got 3 of them,
Mm-hmm.
but there's one what-if scenario that I would still like to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was confusion of the 623 versus the 900, and I don't believe we saw.
I don't think there was confusion there. I think we cleared that up. Do you have a question about that?
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay.
So, well, my understanding is that we did go out and ask for 900 from our voters, and that something changed in the legislature, but I believe our taxpayers are still paying the 900. Is that correct? Like, as a taxpayer, I'm still paying the 900.
Yes, but they don't need to vote on that, it's just part of the regular levy.
Right.
So the
That
same
got
levy that we
moved
have
over.
for everything else
Right.
is,
So if we were to go as a board and say, we're not gonna send this out to vote, we're gonna approve as a board, and we would only be able to approve the 623.
correct.
But what I don't recall seeing in this what-if scenario is what does a 924, whatever the number is, 900 or something, what does that scenario look like? Because I believe we saw the 623.
Well, we would have to ask for, to hit the 920, whatever, we'd have to ask for that $300 difference.
I think I
We
did
have
a
to, you know,
full,
if that's what you're
Right,
suggesting.
but I'm just saying, we haven't seen
Yeah.
that scenario, so I
so
can follow up with you on
I think I did
that.
a $600 one, the regular, and I did the max. So
Correct.
essentially, if
Right.
you take
Yeah.
the average of the two, that's what it would
Yeah,
be.
so that's a little bit off topic, I apologize for that, but that's just something that we can follow up on and I'd like to see, so.
In term, when we're looking at longer term forecasts.
Yeah, when we look at
Yeah.
our next and long-term forecast, I think since our taxpayers are paying 924, that's what they're paying right now.
Well, they're paying more than that in the total levy. Because you have the regular levy, then the referendum levy.
Yes, that's correct, I'm talking about just the 924. I understand the difference between the two. Correct.
Yeah, so it's not just the 300, it's 300 plus 424 plus the, 7281 per pupil, it's all of the
Yeah,
rest.
I think, like I said, my biggest concern is election night, watching all these different levies fail around our surrounding communities. It's gonna be difficult for us unless we build this trust with our community.
Well, many communities passed too. You look at Richfield and some of those, I mean, they did pretty well, so we can mirror some of their work too and understand, you know, follow
That's
their
not-
lead a little bit.
Yeah, but we live in a different community than Richfield. If
So
you're
we
looking at
probably-
Farmington,
I'm just- yeah, I'm
Lakeville,
just-
Jordan, New Prague, those are the districts that we have similar communities with.
Not by size or demographics, no. But,
Demographics, yes.
But that's the danger of trying to cherry pick another district and then compare us, is that there's a lot of differences. I mean, there's a Minnetonka past there's the Flying Colors that is cherry picked sometimes to compare us to. So, you know, when you start to do those comparisons, you gotta be very cognizant of the circumstances, what they already had, what was going on, their size, what they're asking for, which category, everything like that. But for the most part, we are one that still has even less per pupil, so we need to keep that in consideration. And it has been a crutch in this community for a while for our district spend. So we need to consider that, and we need to consider that also in our ability to engage the community in this, in the strategic plan, as well as every other area, to make sure they understand the importance of the education in the district, in this community, and how one defines the other.
Should we bring it back to the amended budget, because we will be looking at this for December approval, so I think, Tammy, your estimates were very good, and I understand that Community Ed has some adjusting to do, and that makes sense, and Joel was relatively new last spring as well, so any other questions regarding the amended budget?
I can also mention last year, I think this board indicated they wanted to continue to keep open enrollment open. Again, it helps with our enrollment. We do have an option of closing it if we want to. I would not recommend that. We need the kids. If they're interested in coming here, I think we should welcome them with open arms.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, and one last thing, I'll just mention, we have 3 CDs that are maturing in December. So we have an opportunity to refinance those in a 24-month CD and get significantly better interest rates. We would see about $92,000 of interest if we choose to do that. I would recommend that we do that. So I'm just letting you know that we have that opportunity, and they can sell the new CDs or buy the new CDs tomorrow on the market. If we wait too long, we're anticipating that the feds will probably reduce rates probably third quarter next year. So if we can take advantage of the high interest rates right now, we should do that.
Will that come to the board for approval?
So this board has indicated they didn't want to, or they didn't need to vote on it, that I would just keep them informed. If we want to change that, we certainly can, but
With that type
I
of
mean,
thing, I'm okay
it's-
with that unless somebody.
yeah, they're just maturing, and we're investing them in another product that we can get better interest rates on.
I have 2 questions about open enrollment. Are there any specific areas in our district, Ola del Lago, Bridges, I'm just, programs where we are full with our in-district kids or our current out-of-district kids? Are there certain hotspots is what I'm asking? I mean,
So far, Lola del Lago, we should be fine. We have 5 sections of kindergarten. We're keeping the 5 sections. It hasn't, they're always going to be tight, but they're not over the cap right now. The only one that's getting close right now is, I believe, Glendale. But again, they're always really tight. They're a popular place. So I think we're sitting okay right now.
I would say that on the open enrollment piece as it ties to the budget, we are seeing increasing interest in our MinCaps program. And we actually have another district who wants to partner and send kids to us for MinCaps.
is that in addition to Farmington?
In addition to.
We already partner with Farmington.
In addition to, yep. So just, that is the one other area that I'm watching right now as well, because I think we're gonna see many districts wanting to have these MinCaps pathways. Your traditional 4-year send-off, but I think these MinCap kind of programs are garnering a lot of interest of students and families. So, but the superintendent and Dan's counterpart, we've been in conversation and exploring a possible partnership. But again, there's a lot of other things, we don't have the space to take on, but the demand is there, so.
I mean, I think given what our district was built for the capacity, I don't think we have any concerns regarding open enrollment. My personal feeling is it's somewhat like school choice, and if a parent feels that they're better fit at a Jordan or New Prague or Lakeville, we all live in very close communities, so with a child who fits into a district and that district is meeting their needs, I think the biggest concern is, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're losing 1,700 in-district students and we're gaining 1,300 open enroll students. So we're still not,
It's the other way
around.
around.
it's not, I don't want to pull up, because I'm counting the private school, I'm counting the open enrollment. Yes, you can count private school because those are students.
Tammy,
we
what
lose.
are the numbers? I don't.
It's, we do not, for open enrollment, we don't really look at the non-public, because those, more than likely, you're not going to get them back. They've made a choice to
But they're still
attend
not,
group-based.
they're still not, I mean, I have a bunch of neighbors who, they send their kids to private school. And those are still students that could be coming to our district if we were meeting their needs, and that's 700 students.
I think that the distinction with private schools that we have to take into account and be real with ourselves about is there's a faith component that we'll never be able to offer. So I want to just be clear that I think there's families who choose because of whatever reason that's not tied to faith. I would also say there's a lot of rationale that faith drives those decisions. We won't know that.
I mean, we have board members here who send their kids to private
I'm
school, not
just-
because of a faith reason.
And I'm just saying it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I wouldn't
meeting
assume to
the
know anyone's
needs.
reason why
It's-
they do or don't, but I think.
Exactly, but it's meeting the needs of the student, and I think you still have to count them, is the point.
But there are things that some schools will offer that we can never offer, and that's a perfect example. And so I can understand the reality of kids choosing public school and really looking and analyzing those numbers.
But they're numbers. I'm just talking about the numbers. That's all I was talking about, is 700 public or private school kids that we're not counting. So the total number is 1,700. And then we're opening enrolling 1,300. We're losing more kids than we're opening enrolling, and that is a fact.
Well, that's another argument to keep open enrollment open.
Right, I'm saying I'm not opposed to it. If we meet the needs of those students, I think,
Tammy,
that's why I was asking about
Tammy,
hospitals.
what are the numbers on the N and the out? I thought we were.
I'd have to look, I didn't bring that report with me.
Yeah. So,
Well,
why don't
if
if we type that onto another study session and make sure we have the correct numbers, that would be appropriate.
And it's the same numbers you sent to me within the last month or so. It's that same report.
But that report doesn't account for private schools.
That's
Yes, it
the
does.
700.
It has them on there.
The one that Beth does.
I don't know, I
Yeah,
have to look
there's
it up.
there's a report that Beth does, spreadsheet, but when you look at the ones from MDE, they pulled the.
Right, it's not the
public out.
MDE report, it's the other
Yep,
report.
that's our own internal
Yep,
document.
Yep.
And includes homeschool as well.
Correct, it has
Yeah.
all different categories.
Well, I think we've established here that your recommendation on keeping an open enrollment open is a good recommendation. Any other budget questions? All right, thank you for that, Tammy. We'll move on to a proclamation tonight. We have Director Oak here, and I've asked Jess to read the Inclusive Schools Appreciation Week, which is December 4th through 8th. The proclamation.
Me too. Inclusive Schools Appreciation Week, December 4th through 8th, 2023. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes December 4th through 8th, 2023 as Inclusive Schools Appreciation Week. Whereas the Inclusive Schools Network and schools around the world have designated the week of December 4th through 8th, 2023 as Inclusive Schools Week. Whereas Prior Lake Savage Area Schools is committed to providing an education in schools and classrooms that are welcoming and capable of educating all children. Whereas the educators of Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognize that each child is unique, learns differently, and therefore learns better if instruction and experiences are tailored to their abilities and interests. Whereas the educators and families of Prior Lake Savage Area Schools have been working hard to ensure that classrooms and schools are characterized as being high-performing and inclusive. Whereas by their efforts to make schools and classrooms high-performing and inclusive, the educators and families of Prior Lake Savage Area Schools have contributed significantly to building a stronger and more inclusive community. Whereas the educators and families of Prior Lake Savage Area Schools deserve to celebrate their successes and wish to reflect on how they might even further improve. Therefore, let it be resolved that the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools join with the Inclusive Schools Network, EDC, and schools, districts, and communities around the world in declaring the week of December 4th through 8th, 2023 as Inclusive Schools Week.
Thank you, Director Elstad, members of the board. I just want to say that we do have a very diverse community here in the school district. Close to 60 different languages, the largest Native student population in our surrounding areas here. And also we are at the moment here welcoming new Ukrainian refugees coming into our district too. Our students have unique needs, and it definitely takes a whole team of our staff, teachers, parents to come together and provide the best educational experience possible for our students. So I'm truly, truly grateful for everyone in our district that is doing the work.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with us tonight so long.
No problem.
To speak on behalf of them. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board governance policy, we're in board policy review. The first reading of policy 208, that's the only one that we have up tonight for the first reading. Our second and final reading will take place at our next board meeting on December 11th. So any feedback I know we introduced it. Mary, would you like to speak to it at all? We introduced it at the last meeting, had some discussion, but we'll carry that over to our discussion tonight.
So it's typical, we introduce it at the board meeting and then ask all board members to read through it, and then provide their overall comments, changes, suggested changes, et cetera, in this meeting during the study session, so a more full and robust discussion. But we're making the updates not only to update it for things like not having the board policies only on a binder inside the school district, et cetera, that we are putting them online. Also to reflect the policy committee that was agreed to in the last fiscal year prior to the January 23rd new board taking over. But we have established that policy committee now, and one of the concerns that we obviously have coming out of this is the fact that prior to having community engagement in the policy meetings, then in order to allow the community more time to communicate or to help the board review or whatever, we had the full 3 readings before we voted. If we continue to do that, in addition to waiting for the policy committee to make their changes, et cetera, we're going to have a significant backlog. Also, having the community policy committee, the community involvement in that, also helped with community engagement, so that potentially helps with additional transparency, which is our original goal, as well as allows more community input on the forefront, which is also why we have the 3 readings. More importantly is we're going to end up in a heck of a backlog if we don't make some changes to how we're moving some of these policies through. So that was kind of the overall. The other issue was to help make the policy consistent with other areas like curriculum, finance, et cetera, to make sure that we are reflecting those changes. So there's one change that, because we started off with the MSBA-based policy, compared it to ours and all that, there's one change that I saw that didn't make it in here, and that was on implementation of policy under that section B. It says each school board member shall have access to the school district policies. That was out of the old MSBA one, and that's actually the public shall have access. I'm not quite sure how we conflated the two between the two of those, but that should have been the public. And then, of course, we took out the old language that says the manuals would be available at the DSC, and now we have a copy of the school district policy shall be placed online on the school district website. So that was the only change that when I reviewed it again, I realized that that didn't quite make the final revision that I believe, Enrique, we all discussed, so.
So MSBA does say each school board member shall have access to district policies. Are you saying that you want to change it? Or are you saying that you were trying to align it with MSBA? Because that's what
the original MSBA policy had that, as well as the manuals available in the DSC. But now that we have everything online and we're improving transparency, it's really should be, that was in line with the other statement of the manuals, and that we would all have access to that, and that the manuals would be made available for reference purposes to employees and other interested policies. Now we're putting everything online, so the public, everyone can go to our website and get access to it. It's not only school board members, and it's not only school board members that would have the manual.
So it's more accurate to say the public.
It's more accurate and reflective of current state to say the public. The MSBA had, was, you know, a little old school there for where we've come in our technology.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. I have a question that I actually didn't, when we were discussing the policy, I never really picked up on it. And I want to get clarification on what your meaning is on how this policy was developed or changed. Under adoption of a policy, and I just really want to understand the meaning, The school board shall give notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies by the policy committee or district administration. So the way that I'm reading that is basically it's saying that the policy committee or the district administration can come up with a policy and put it on the, basically put it on a school board agenda. Is that my correct understanding?
Okay, so coming up with the policy is not part of A, that's actually discussed in another section about who can
I
propose.
see that, yep. Mhm.
So that wasn't meant to be inferred from that, nor is it stated there.
Yep.
But and I'm gonna rely on Emily and Enrique, of course, because he was part of this. The changes is that we added the policy committee in there, or district administration, because those are where policy changes or adoption of new policies actually come in from. After you read C of the section above that, where proposed policies and ideas are submitted to the superintendent or designee, and which is district administration, and then they're sent that way through the policy committee for review of policy changes, and then the adoption piece comes in after the development of the policy. So I'm not quite sure I was very eloquent in my description there, but Emily, would you like to, or
Well, I think.
Dr. Herman, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word by is kind of the key word there. And if you change it to the word to, the school board shall give notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies to the policy committee or district administration. So basically, the school board owns the policy process. And if you change the word that the school board is giving notice of the changes to the policy committee versus.
The school board doesn't bring them forward.
Right, we
The
don't.
administration does based on a law change, which we experienced this summer, or the policy committee. They bring them
Yeah.
forward to us for approval.
Right, I understand, and that's the way MSB has it written. And so I'm almost thinking that it should say, so MSBA has, the school board shall give notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies by placing the item on the agenda of 2 school board meetings. That's the way they have it written. And the way we have it written is the school board shall give notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies, the new policies by the policy committee.
Or district
Or
administration.
district administration. So it's completely different than what MSBA is saying. Basically, the whole context of it is different, in my opinion. The whole context behind it.
The goal of the statement is to describe the process that new policies and/or changes to policies originate from district administration bringing forward things that they've heard from the committee or the policy committee themselves, and then we bring them forward to the board and place them on the board agenda for the ultimate review, changes and approval. So it's trying to summarize in a sentence the overall process of it comes from policy, a committee or a district administrator changing it based off of law changes to the board via board meetings on the agendas in order for the board then to review and ultimately approve.
Yeah.
So it's trying to summarize that process, to expand upon where are these proposals coming from?
Right.
And where are these changes coming from? It's coming from district administration and or the policy committee.
So I wonder if it should read, the school board, comma, policy committee, or district administration shall give notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies by placing the item on the agenda of 2 school board meetings. Because basically what we're doing is we're adding in the policy committee,
Yeah.
and we're adding in district administration. Those are the 2 words that are different from the MSBA policy.
I think you changed the direction that way. Again, the board gives notice because it comes from the policy or district administration, so when you add in the commas, you put us all in the same bucket, and
And
we're not.
we all should be in the same bucket.
We are not in the same bucket, that's what Emily just described, and that's what,
Yeah, the board, so we have 2 prepositional phrases that maybe from a grammatical standpoint is confusing, process versus action. Any grammarians in the house? But I think this is about this, so the school board has the ultimate action and authority to bring policies forward. That's the second prepositional phrase, by placing them on blah, blah, blah.
right.
Where they get their information to take action comes from the policy committee and district administration, and that's there because MSBA's is generic, not believing every district will have that structure in place, so they kept theirs generic. We have that structure in place that informs the board. So resource, fulfillment comes from the policy committee and administration, but your action is still your action. I think it's, again, I'm kind of joking, but I'm serious. It's a grammatical issue of two prepositional phrases side by side.
This one right here.
So it's just more
So-
detail in our policy because we have a
Right.
policy.
The policy, the detail makes sense. It's just how do you need a comma? Do you need a
So could
You
we
mentioned
two
Edina,
commas
so-
around the separate for
Or
the first
could we
purpose?
just realign it and just say, the policy committee or district administration shall provide notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies to the school board by placing them on the agenda to school board meetings, and just move that around?
I would,
I think that's more aligned with way.
I don't think you would want to do that, sorry, Lisa, because I think by adding the or, it gives authority of action to the policy committee. You can't do that.
Well, let's look, Sheriff Crosby, you had mentioned Edina's policy in our last meeting, and I'd like to look that back up, because they do have a policy committee that's only made up of school board directors, not the community, but they do have a policy committee. I mean, many boards have policy committees, but looking at their policy, how it's written, I liked when you read
I'm
it,
sorry.
it made sense when you read it at our
Yeah.
last meeting.
I'll try and pull it up.
I'm working on it right now, I just can't find it.
So, and I'm gonna ask Enrique, you're the guru with our language sometimes. What if we, cause I think we're all on the same page with the direction of where it comes from and how we're gonna do it. If we're gonna move this around a little bit, could we ask you to go ahead and just play with the grammar on this sentence?
Yep, I can do that.
And then,
Look at Edina.
It's the same number,
Yeah.
208.
If you want.
yeah, there's,
I mean,
everyone does
whomever.
this a little differently, because they have,
There's a district policy manual.
there's different things, but,
It's
let's
like
look at
the
what
school
we do.
board, comma, through information gathered by policy committee or district administration, comma,
That's
shall
exactly-
give
that's
notice
exactly
of
right.
proposed policy changes or adoption of new policy by placing. So the school board is the subject of action.
Right.
The policy committee and administration are the subject of resourcing the
Correct.
school board. So I think that's what will solve it grammatically.
Yep, that makes more sense.
There's your commas.
I'm aligned with that.
Okay, did someone capture that?
Yep.
Well, it's
We-
recorded, so
Transcribed.
it's recorded, so just go back and watch the recording.
Enrique, I'm actually, if it's okay, because again, we kind of depend on, Enrique and I are in the
Yeah,
policy.
due right,
committee. We
8:12
kinda
PM, so I
depend
don't
on
have
him
to
be
remember where
the
it's at.
English major here.
8:12 PM, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
And then the other thing that I know I brought up before, and I'd like to, I know you and, I appreciate the dialogue, Director France, but I went back and looked at our board operating norms policy, and I looked at 6.1.1, I looked at 6.14, and nowhere in those policies does it say the proposals shall be read, and public comment. Now, it does say we allow public comment, but nowhere does it say that the proposal shall be read and public comment will be allowed during 2 meetings prior to final school board action. So
we
it's
want-
assumed, because there's lots of different, it's in different pieces of that policy, and it's assumed because we actually do review policy at a school board meeting and at a study session, so it's assumed, but nowhere does it state it.
Okay, can
So
I,
I still feel strongly that we should have that language in there.
can I make an adjustment to the assumption here? In our 200 policies, we state that people can come to the forum and talk and make comment on anything
Yes, we do.
on the school board agenda.
Yep, that's 6.11 and 6.14, that's correct.
It's also in the 200s when we go through the board operating norms too, where we make sure that the forum's in there.
Yeah, that's
And
what I'm
we-
referring to, the
yeah.
operating norms, 6.11 and 6.14.
So it's embedded in there, And therefore, because what I stated, and the reason why the change was made for this to take the specific language out is because that actually governs. So when we said permit, now I don't care if we add it in here, but I would suggest that if we're gonna add it into the policy, then we go and we add it in also for every other place where people obviously can make a comment on everything, because to me, it looked out of place just to mention it here and then say we're permitting that here, because we can't unpermit it if it's in the operating norms.
But this
In other
is
words-
specific to policy. So
Well-
this is specific to policy, saying that we as a community, we as a board will ensure that the policy will be read and public comment will be allowed.
So we don't ensure every action on every committee or, this is very specific to policy. And so unless you can point to me exactly where it says in our norms policy that the policies will be read and public comment will be allowed, that specific language, then I'm opposed to taking it out of here, because I think it I don't know. To hear, like I said, it shows transparency and it ensures that it's gonna happen.
No, I understand where your passion is. All I'm saying is that when you write policies, and because I do write a lot of policies in my own organizational work and have to defend them legally, is that consistency is king. Inconsistency is very, very bad.
Right, and vagueness is very bad.
And because the policies, all of our policies are legal, they're legally binding and enforceable, that when you are inconsistent, that actually adds vagueness. So when I looked at the policies concerning our finance and everything discussing curriculum and all the other stuff that we also bring up, including the budget, we make general statements in the 200s saying that everything that's here and all policies have to go through the board and be placed on the agenda. That's here, that's not disputable. When we made the language of we will permit and all that, technically we can't unpermit people from
Understand
making
that. This
comments.
is what I'm
And
trying to
let
be
me
clarified.
finish.
This is
I'm
very
not done
specific.
speaking, Director Atkinson.
Okay.
And because all the policies in process already go through the agenda and have to be read and everything here, and our forum comments allow the public to make comments, and we already have in the policy committee, they can come to the policy committee. This is the only place we specifically bring out that people can make those comments on policy. We didn't bring them out on everything else they're also allowed to make comments on. So if it comes down to it, if we make the adjustments in here, my concern is if we say it's permitted, we can't unpermit it. So that's the first thing. So that's kind of it's a misleading statement. And number two, if we only put that language here, should we then consider putting it in every other piece that's also brought to the board and read in front of them to reiterate that they can also make comments? Or are we trying to juxtapose only policy versus everything else? And that's where my issue with consistency came from.
But I think you're confusing the issue, because the wording that I don't have an issue with public comment. I'm very crystal clear on that. The issue I have is the proposals shall be read. That's the wording that I have a concern with. The policies have to be read at a school board meeting, at 2 school board meetings. And yes, we can take out the word public comment, I don't really care. But they have to be read at 2 meetings prior to final school board approval. That's the issue and so why would we take that out?
And the other thing that we talked about, Director Atkinson, is that we don't physically actually read the policies verbatim. We place them in there. That was the other thing that came out in our discussion.
Then the proposals, the policies should be, I don't care what the word is, but taking out the language of saying that the policies shall be read. And again, I like putting and public comment will be allowed. If you want to take that out, that's fine. But during 2 meetings prior to final school board action, I think that's really critical.
So can I
Go ahead.
And I thought we,
No, I want, so I think we understand the 2 perspectives. I certainly do. Can I get some other board members to weigh in on their thoughts regarding the policy?
So, okay. If removing the wording, the proposals shall be read, is the thought that then it's not saying that they need to be read anymore? Is that?
That could happen, correct? That could be right, that could happen.
Just so
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah,
just so
or
I'm-
it could be at a meeting, like a professional development session, where people aren't allowed to have public comment. So this just validates that when we're working on policy, by having the language in here, the proposals, I like the word policy, but the policies shall be read and public comment will be allowed during 2 meetings prior to final school board action. I just, like I said.
is there somewhere else in our operating policies that it just states that we, or is it this policy
Yeah, there
in
is.
particular? That the readings happen at board meetings twice?
There's nowhere in our board operating norms that it says for policies to be approved, they will be read at 2 school board meetings. There's nowhere, this is the policy right here. That is correct. Unless you can point it, and I mean, I
Where there
looked.
is public comment.
Yeah, unless I'm missing it, but I looked through that policy.
So we are conflating 2 of the issues here, in my opinion. And again, the only reason why it was taken out was consistent, okay? The old language has, we actually read the policies, and 10, 15 years ago, we would openly read the entire policy. We don't do that anymore. We place the policies in there for review, and because anything that goes to the board is available to the public to be reviewed and be commented on. So that was one of the things that did get brought up, and it, just like the policies only being in a hard manual, et cetera, it was older language. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, and again, the only thing I want to do is make sure that we're consistent. That's it. And then we used to have it on 3 readings and then the board vote. So a minimum of 3 times it had to be brought up. When we started the policy committee, and now it goes through the policy committee first, and the policy committee actually meets less frequent than the board, we're running into that backlog. So there's a lot of opportunity here. There's substantive changes, et cetera, that's put in here that we would have it listed in more study sessions for review and vote. All we're trying to do is make it consistent across the board, and that's the only thing that, and my question to everybody is, if we leave this language in here, now, again, the red language, if we wanted to find that, that's fine, but we don't actually read them out loud anymore. We tell people to review them and whatever. But the other languages in here is what I don't want to happen, and maybe I'm overstating this, and maybe not. I ask for everyone's opinion, is that if we say we're going to ask for public comment and they can give it anyways, and we want them to give it, and we increase the transparency through the policy committee, by only stating that here, should we go and make sure it's restated every other place we have similar topics in all of our policies to say, you know, to re-add in the public comment, even though we do that globally in 200. If we only place it here, are we going to run into an interpretation later on where it looks like we don't allow it other places? That's my concern.
Yeah, so if I could ask a clarifying question. Well, I have 2 clarifying questions. One is, you had mentioned like for curriculum, finance. So, yeah, but, okay, so are you asking for policies that are pertaining to those subjects? Is that kind of how you're clarifying? If we added it here, would it be added into policies that pertain to those others? I'm confused on.
It was never in the other ones.
And I don't know what the other ones are.
Okay.
Like, that's where my miscommunication or misunderstanding is, I understand what you're saying. I understand why taking it out here, if you're thinking it's consistent. but I want to know where the other consistent places are that you're stating.
Yeah.
I would clarification to that.
Okay, so
Is it like a policy, or that's where I'm confused?
Can I just, my interpretation is, if you're saying we review the budget every month, which we do, and you're saying the public can come and comment on that budget, so then that is not, this is specific to policy. And like saying, we will not approve a policy without having it on 2 school board meetings. I mean, we don't say, we're gonna review the budget 6 times, the people, you know, everybody's gonna have 6 chances for, I mean, we're not that specific about all those other things.
let's bifurcate procedure versus, and again, if we want to put it back in there, that's fine. My only concern is we can't unpermit it without changing the 200 policy also. So that was what we kind of talked about in our discussion, is you can't unpermit it and when we don't physically read the full policy anymore. So it's placed in there and everyone, so that's one issue. But the other thing is with the budget, we do review it all the time, but we never specifically state anywhere that people can come and comment on it, and they most certainly can. With everything else that's in there too, we don't ever specifically state people can come and comment on it. And here, we specifically state people can come and comment on it, and they can anyways. So that's where I was going with the consistency. When you put all this together, like if we were to create a policy manual and you say something only in one section and not in all the other sections, and yet you already have it globally, how is that interpreted?
Right.
And that was my concern.
Yep, and I think that,
yeah.
I think that concern is understandable, but I also, you know, as I'm trying to process and talk, and I'm a very much a verbal processor, so what I feel like makes the most sense is because policy is our law book. I mean, policy is our, so budget isn't necessary. It's just a different, nothing is the same as policy as far as our board work goes. And so I think, given that, it makes sense to me. I think I would be in agreement with the keeping the readings, because with policy, the what that is as far as our board work goes, it's just it's different than curriculum or budget, or it's different than that. So stating that, to me, I don't think that it would be needed to be stated in other spaces. That's my opinion. And again, first time verbally processing that, so that doesn't mean tomorrow I might think something different.
So in reading that.
Does that make sense though?
Reading the sentence the way it is, to me, I said this at the last meeting, it's implied that there would be public comment. Lisa wasn't comfortable, fair, that with it being implied. So there was talk about adding 2 school board meetings where there is public comment.
Right.
Well, I mean, you pulled up Edina. I'm looking at Edina right now. I love the way they have theirs written. Theirs basically says, the school board gives notice of proposed policy changes or adoption of new policies by placing the item on the agenda of at least 2 school board meetings. And then they list out 1, the first meeting is for discussion, and 2, the second meeting is for final action, period. The proposals will be available for the public to review and comment at both meetings prior to final school board action. And I like the word review because, like you said, we're not actually reading them. So I like the way they have theirs written, and I think if we can get an alignment on that, just changing it to that, I think we'd be good.
Well, they have it on the typical, they have the MSBA standard
Well,
language.
theirs is different than MSBA.
It's an enhancement.
It's the same thing that we have, but if so, what I would suggest, so we have the first part of that thing that we're already gonna revise and add the comments in, or commas in, and then,
See, I'm reading it. Can you see it?
and then the second part, instead of taking out that thing that we just leave in the sentence, proposals shall be read and public comment, and will be allowed is everyone okay with that language? Because again, we cannot disallow it. We already have it in our board operating norms that they can. So that was something that I wanted to
think
make sure.
that's why
we-
Allow is not used, yeah, in that
Right.
word.
Better.
I mean, I like the way Edina has it
Yeah.
written.
Okay.
The public to review and comment. They can review it and they can comment at both meetings.
Okay, yeah.
I have a question on that. When you say we can't unallow it, what would be an example of if we would unallow somebody not to provide public comment on a policy?
So we used
I'm just, to
to,
clarify.
so there used to be a rule,
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
so like a
Speak
form
to
rule,
that.
So
there
it-
used to be a form rule where you
Yeah.
couldn't comment on the day it was being
Correct.
done, and we
At a business
reversed
meeting.
that.
You could comment only on things that were going to be discussed at a study session, but then when you got to the business
Yes, it was
meeting, you
confusing.
couldn't comment on anything that was going to
That's
be
on the
discussed on the
agenda.
agenda.
Okay,
It was
got it.
reversed.
Right.
and we
changed that a
decided
couple years
to,
ago.
To not have.
Yeah.
that.
why
And
limit,
Right.
why
Okay.
limit what the
That's
public can talk
that's a
about?
good change. I mean, that adds
Yeah,
transparency and
that
trust.
changed my first year.
Yeah.
That happened
Right
my first
away.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right
a-
away.
it was a very good change, because people were so confused. What can I say?
remember that.
Well, right, and it's,
And it felt like it changed.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think it's a good change, so.
the public should, I mean,
So
it
do we
makes
have
sense.
board direction to change that sentence to be the language that was stated? Because,
I mean, what,
Yeah.
the will
I
of the
personally
board.
like what Edina has written. I think the question is, do we want to look at that and write it as that, or?
Or something very similar, something very, yeah, that, the,
It also
or
incorporates
maybe
the
identical,
policy
yeah,
committee
bring it
and
forward
district
and we'll look at it
administration.
Well,
again.
that's a different line, yeah.
Right.
We already talked about that, yeah.
But directionally, yes, I think we
Directionally.
have,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. so,
okay.
and the only other thing that we said, so Enrique, if you could take that and make that, not only the grammar change to the first of what we talked about, but also the change. Again, the original language, so proposals shall be read. When I did the research, that was from the almost 2 decades thing where we were, because we only had them in a manual and it was, the manual was only available, that we would physically read the whole policy out loud. And we don't do that anymore. So should that language be updated?
Can you point to it?
Yeah.
That was the first, so adoption of policy A.
Okay.
The proposal shall be read and public comment will be allowed, that thing, so the first section of that proposal shall be read. That kind of went along with the manuals and all that from before. That language has been around there for a while. We don't publicly read the
I
entire
think it
policy.
was
Where
the
are you at?
reviewed.
Yeah.
I think the
It's-
term was reviewed.
I think
Yeah.
adoption and review of policy A. And I think
Yeah,
that's-
so if you go
So you're going
to
up
our
or-
proposed policy.
Oh, I'm right here.
Oh, do you have it there? Okay.
This is ours.
It's crossed out.
Oh, the
Proposal-
bottom.
Proposal shall be read.
Well, I think the way they have it, they say the proposal shall be available for public to
Right.
review and comment at both meetings prior to final school board action.
So
I think if you write it
it's
that way,
much
it will be,
clearer.
it's much clearer, because you're saying, this is gonna happen first, this is gonna happen second, and then the community knows.
And we do already have that the policies will be placed in the board thing, so they're gonna be available in the board packet. So I'm just trying to be consistent here, that was my whole thing.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think
And-
it,
Yeah, so,
at this point, we're splitting hairs.
Yeah.
If we directionally know we want things to be, if we've said it already, then we don't need to repeat ourselves, right? We can call
Right.
that out later, but directionally, we definitely want it to have components that are in Edina's, and I think it makes sense.
correct.
Okay.
And then I just have one small question. On the very back of the policy, under implementation of policy, under C, we say the superintendent or designee shall be responsible for keeping the district policies current. The only difference in MSBA is they add in the language that it says the superintendent or designee and individual board members shall be responsible for keeping the district policies current. So my question is, because board work is, policy work is board work, should we be included as board members in that statement? And I'm just gonna take a quick peek at another district to see what they have there as well, because I didn't do that, I just looked at MSBA.
Well, technically, our board and as a governing board is not responsible. We actually delegate that to the superintendent, who delegates that to Director of Administration Services, or the appropriate, like, food service or whoever's the policy belongs to. We don't take on, we've never taken on that role to be individually responsible for, except for the 200s. We don't take on that role here.
But even
If that's something
updating
that
them,
was
we
a-
don't,
Yeah.
updating the
Edina has it
actual.
the same too.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's a,
And
I'm
individual permissive
comfortable
policies
with the
currently
language,
correspond.
'cause
I don't know if
think
they
we
just
want that to be owned and housed with the Office of the Superintendent to manage the policies online based on the approvals coming out of board meetings. I don't think we want individual board members managing that.
No.
Yeah,
think
I don't
our
know why it's written the way it is.
responsibility would be
Yeah, maybe for
reviewing,
smaller
making sure that we
districts.
Yeah,
set the
smaller
time.
Well,
we
yeah,
feel we
that's what.
are-
Well, MSBA wrote it, and it is
Yeah.
in theirs, and I granted, I understand, you know, what you brought forth about the concern about them being like, in the district of where they're located. But like I said, it's in there, and I just wonder why it's in there, and maybe we could ask MSBA, why is it in there? Why did they have it written?
Yeah, I don't have a concern about it. I like the way ours reads, but if you want to dig into that more.
I can ask, yeah, I'll reach out to
Yeah.
MSBA and ask them why it's written that way.
We're gonna, you know, talk about it and approve it on the 11th.
Right,
so
I can ask.
presumably,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay.
And that's it, I didn't have anything else, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Moving on to the second reading of policies. So the review of this group of policies took place October 30th, and the first reading November 13th, and board approval at our next meeting. So we can go through them one by one if you'd like, or if we have certain, you know, if we're good with most of the changes, because I think we were at the last meeting. Okay. So if we're good with them as is, so 401, 402, 404, 405, 412, 509, 511, 533, and 534. They will all get approved on the 11th, it'll be up for approval. All right. Superintendent relations,
I'm good.
we're good, okay. Informational items, so there will be an executive committee meeting on December 29th at 3 p.m. For a legislative platform pre-planning meeting, because we will be bringing forward the legislative platform to review on December 11th at that meeting for the entire board to weigh in.
So that's November 29th, that's this Wednesday, correct?
That is, yes, yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And just FYI for the whole board, because of the big session that we just went through, there's very little changes. I mean, you look at all the associations, very little. So we'll reflect, as typical, a lot of the professional associations. The one caveat, you know, like we pulled stuff that got passed in our legislative agenda already, so we pulled that off. The other stuff we just state because it's an important issue. The one aspect that I think we all want to talk about is that will be a hot topic as SRO language. And that is something that actually Scott County is taking on as well. And I spoke to their legislative group along with a couple other soups. So that will be one big thing. Other than that, it'll be pretty straightforward.
One thing.
I thought you were gonna say the same thing and
Yeah, thinking of managerial rights with respect to negotiations on contracts for class sizes. I know that's one area that MSPA was looking to do a pullback on.
You want to speak to any of that?
My association is definitely pushing hard on legislation around that. I do believe under our, I think it's our 5th section, it really speaks to that, the unfunded mandates and changes to that. That would be a huge one in my interpretation of the language because it's really requiring us to negotiate on an item that they're not giving us any funding for. So, I think it is covered.
It's an umbrella clause that we kept,
umbrella.
because you never know where the legislature will go. So we just catch them all under that one clause, and it's not unique to a certain thing.
Because there's a lot of other unfunded mandates that pass that we need some support around, whether that's ESST or the between terms for unemployment or,
Right.
I'll stop.
Yeah.
You've seen the list.
Yeah.
And we also, I don't know if you want to speak to the data request piece of it as well. talking about the public data requests and the opening up the ability to request full cost of data requests.
Oh, yeah, to reimburse, so again, in the age of everything being requested, it is burning out small districts like ourselves. And so trying to recoup costs for the time intensity is something that's also being discussed with a lot of professional groups because it's happening everywhere. And, you know, we just don't have the sheer power with everything else being a priority in a small district for that to be someone's full-time job.
Would that have to, they'd have to change the law though, because it's in the law, Data Practices Act, yep.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's some good food for thought as we look at our legislative agenda, and then we'll bring it back for the whole board to weigh in. Thank you.
Question on that.
Yeah.
So Enrique and I are going to our delegate assembly this weekend, Friday and Saturday. So is that something where we should give you a report or
Board report.
a board report at the next meeting? Okay, you don't want it ahead of time? I mean, obviously your meeting is
No, I think
Wednesday.
MSD has their platform.
Yeah, so this is part of developing that platform of
Right.
what are the 21 different proposals, which ones?
Sorry, AMSD has their.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, AMSD
Yes.
has ours.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question? When does that occur?
Friday
This
and
week.
Saturday.
Yeah.
And we're having our legislative meeting on Wednesday, so yes, I agree with you.
Well, no, the legislative meeting Wednesday is just the initial framing of how we
Right.
want to bring this forward. But I
think
think
you
we all
could-
get learnings
Right.
from this.
Yeah, I think
That-
you
Yeah,
guys
that's
Oh,
what I was
okay.
saying.
bring that to the
Sorry.
table
Yeah.
and we'll discuss it on the 11th.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
use
I didn't
framework
know
from
if you
Yep,
wanted
AMSD.
something.
yep,
and
AMSD,
other-
MSBA.
Yeah, that'll make for good discussion.
Okay.
Okay, future agenda topics. So opportunity for board members to suggest future agenda items. Anyone have anything they want to add?
Earlier, we talked about looking at a different scenario for the funding piece. Do you remember?
No, I'm trying to blank.
Oh,
Yeah, the.
3 different scenarios.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure
Oh,
that was
yeah,
captured.
okay, thank you, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so adding I guess that one, I didn't realize that'd be a good place to add this now, yes. Yeah, you're right, that is a good spot. So looking at a scenario that's based on the 900 5-year forecast. Whatever the voters approved the first time, 924, I believe it is. I have to look back at my notes. I believe it was 924. What is it, 923? 923.67, just looking at what does that number look like from a forecast standpoint?
Yeah, okay.
It's gonna be halfway between 6 and 17.
Yeah, but I'd like to see that as a just a 5-year
I got it.
forecast, thank you.
All right, we'll adjourn and transition to a closed meeting.
Anything else, did you guys have
Sorry,
anything else?
yeah, anyone? Okay. Do we need a motion? I don't think so.